So, hello everyone, good evening. Welcome back to the session. Hope you're all able to hear me now, team. Please do give me a quick confirmation so we will continue with the session. Right, definitely, Pulak. We will be having that definitely. So do not worry about it. So yeah. Okay, so great everybody. So just for a quick recap of what we have done yesterday, right? We started working with the version control systems like Git. What exactly is Git, how Git works, basically how a developer uses the Git to store the source code accordingly or track the versions of a source code. So that's what we understood yesterday for the initial step, right? And then later we started working with Jenkins. We understood what is Maven, why do we need Maven, right? And then later why we need Jenkins or how Jenkins helps us build a continuous integration pipeline with which we are able to look into it, right? Now, yesterday we have built the continuous integration pipeline team successfully. We saw that we automated everything whenever there is a commit or happens on the source code. We just saw that our pipeline getting triggered and the CI pipeline goal, the result of the CI pipeline is always that you get an artifact, nothing but an executable file that would actually help you deploy your application into various environments. Now that is what think team, this is what we actually discussed, right? This is what all we actually discussed yesterday. So once we understood about the Jenkins team, right? We understood and we completed the Jenkins yesterday, whatever we wanted to cover, we covered it. Jenkins by default has a security and everything, you know what? Jenkins by default uses its own internal database to store the security credentials. I hope you are all able to create the default things and able to log in, I believe. So if there are any issues, team, you can write to us. Please write to training@devopsuniversity.org if you see any issues in doing anything. We will be replying to you accordingly whenever it is possible, right? So that's the basic thing, team, that we did it yesterday. But today we will be starting with a new concept, right? Which is going to be the configuration management, I call it. Now, once we understand the configuration management, we will jump onto the next things accordingly. So for a scenario team here, what exactly we are trying to achieve, correct? Now that we understood about GitHub, right? A Git or a GitHub where we actually get the source code, right? Source code will be available for you under the GitHub like a source code management tool. Now, once you have done with that, now we understood that the DevOps engineer role starts once the source code is available or developer tells you that, yes, this is available to you. Now we use Jenkins for automating the process of build process automation to execute a series of stages which are part of your continuous integration pipeline. Now we understood about we created a package, right? The last stage in your CI pipeline is that a package where we will normally get a WAR file. Now a WAR file is nothing but our application bundle, which we can deploy it onto a server and then start running your application or access your application accordingly. Okay, so just that team, try to understand we need this WAR file to be deployed onto various set of environments. Consider that starting from your development environment, we have QA, and then we have your pre-production, and then finally you have your production, right? Now these are the environments team that every organization may see it. So starting from the dev, QA, and you would have your pre-prod, right? And then finally, our target or a goal is to deliver your application into the production environment. We also usually call this as a live environment. Now, as we also understood that in order to deploy a web application, we need a web server to be running for us. For example, say that I'm setting up a Tomcat, a Java, and let's say that OS, which we have it on a machine, right? Means I'll be preparing a machine team which has an operating system. Then I would have to set my Java or a Tomcat server. Then I'll take the WAR file, right? Now, then I will have to place this WAR file on my server or deploy it onto a server with which I'll be able to access an application using that. Now, the question here is that team, we are going to talk about a concept called as configuration management. what exactly is configuration management and why do we need the configuration management. That is what is the main thing, right? So trying to understand the things here, team. Right, just give me a second. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So here it is, team. So coming back here, so consider that a scenario here. Now, how many servers do you have in your production? That is what is the question right now. So how many servers do you have in your production normally? Like you all guys are working, do you know about your production environment? Does anybody have idea about how many servers do you see in your production environment? Right. Now, whenever I'm talking about environment, team, environment will always consisting of multiple servers. It is not a single server, right? It is not a single server for sure, because in order to maintain the high availability of your application, we normally have to at least two servers. Two is the minimum. Two is the minimum, or many servers you call it, as you guys are saying it. That's correct. Now consider that in my production, for example, I have 800 servers. It is not 8, it is 800 servers. That number of servers, team, is nothing but a purely depending on number of clients or users who are accessing your application. For example, think about it like a facebook.com application. There are millions of users who are using it. How many servers would Facebook have set it up to give the access to those many users? Do you think one server, two server, 10 servers? Can 10 server handle 10 million requests? Right, a million requests at least, not about 10 million, but 10 million requests. Is it possible for 10 servers to handle it? May not be, right? So in that case, in order to maintain the high availability of your application, Facebook might have deployed 1,000 servers. Maybe I get taken into consideration. Now that is a scenario here, team. Based on the application usage, you normally scale your application into n number of servers. Now I'll be running the same application, same var file. Consider that is a facebook.var file. The same application I need to run across n number of servers, which means that I need to install Tomcat on 1,000 servers. I need to install Java on 1,000 servers. Tomorrow, if I want to copy my var file onto 1,000 servers, how would you do this? Is it possible for you to do it easily? Now we need an automation, correct? We need definitely an automation there. Now that is where, team, we talk about environment, or we talk about a tool called as configuration management. Okay, configuration management is very much needed in every organization, right? Now what exactly is configuration management? How configuration management is going to help us implement the changes or do something automation to your infrastructure basically. Now considering that scenario, team, here look at the screen right now. Hope you're all able to see the screen, right? Now this is what it is, team. Thinking about a configuration management. Now configuration management is all about something, or changing something on a system or a computer or a server that you call it. Once you log into the server, team, whatever the things you do it, those are normally called as changes, right? Changing something on a system. What would you do in it? What would you change it basically? What is exactly a change? Like any action that you normally perform it on a server, after you log into it, whatever it is called as, it is like after I log into my server, I installed Git. That is a change. I installed Java, Jenkins, Maven, S3. Those are also called as changes that you do to a system basically. So consider this one, team. If I ask you to install something on a single server, you would happily do it. But if I ask you to do the same thing on 1,000 servers, you might be feel bored, or you might miss something. You may misconfigure something by knowingly or unknowingly. There is a chances of error prone systems you will have it. Now this is where, team, we must automate it. So in order to make our life easier, we must run the automation that will take care of the necessary things for you. Now that is where, team, whenever I talk about a change is nothing but always changing something, like creating files, right? Creating files, or installing something, or upgrading something, or uninstalling something. Whatever you do to a system, that is called as a change. Now in other words, a change can be called as a configuration change also, right? Any change that is done on a system or a server is simply called as a configuration change. Now we understood a change and a configuration change. Now, why do we need config management again, or a config management tools? Is that when you think about implementing a change across n number of servers, we think about automation. Now that automation can be implemented using configuration management tools, right? Now that is the just understanding team that you need to have it. For example, for a simple example, I'll say that in your organization, you have an IT team, right? Think about your IT team responsibility is to maintain the laptops or desktops that are allocated to the employees of your organization. Consider if your organization has 1,000 employees, every employee would get a desktop or a laptop. Now, all these laptops have loaded with some operating system. Now, if there is an upgrade to operating system, does your IT team come to your desk, take the laptop and do they upgrade it? Or do they push the software to your system and say that you reboot it? What exactly they would do it? Do they come to your system and do something on your systems? Does anybody see that? No, right? You normally don't do that. Or your IT team does not do that. Basically, they normally sit at their their system. They will push something to your system. That's it. Now, if that is required a reboot, they will ask you to reboot it, or that required does not require, they'll just simply apply it and then leave it. You will get an update, your system will be rebooted and your system will be updated according, or whatever the change that they want to implement it on your laptops, they never come to your desk, they will just apply it, or they will just push it from their systems to your system. But how is it happening? Basically, there is a team, they are using a tool that will help them implement a change on your system sitting at their desk. Now for them, basically for your IT team, your laptops and desktops are the production environment, correct? That's how you need to think about it. Now you are a IT engineer, you are about to maintain a web application. So for you, the production environment is like that again for you. So you are also thinking about implementing a change on 1,000 servers. So you would also have to sit at your desk and implement a change on the 1,000 servers. So how would I do it again? We did config management. So that is where team you just can have an idea about what is config management, or why do we need configuration management tools. Now when we talk about a configuration management tools here team, there are many configuration management tools in the market, such as Ansible is the popular one. That's what we're going to discuss about it. But there are tools like Puppet, Chef, right? You have a Salt, you have CF engine, right? There is a Blade Logic. So there are many tools in the market. Again, just like you have different, Android phones, you have it like Vivo, Oppo, OnePlus, Samsung, LG. So you have various brands, right? That is the only thing. The purpose of the phone is same thing, but they work in the little bit different way. The implementation side, they will have a different features or different UI according. So think that the same thing here. Ansible is a very famous configuration management tool which we will be working on. So the rest of the tools are also for the same purpose, but they have their own implementation style of configuration changes. So considering that one, so I'll be talking about now Ansible. For Ansible team, so think about it now. I'm thinking about putting something or pushing something from one system to all the 1,000 servers. So I would have to install Ansible software on one system. Now that system, I call it as my Ansible controller. Okay, so that system I'll call it as Ansible controller. So I'll just take simply a virtual machine and I install software called as Ansible. That machine becomes my Ansible controller machine, which means that it is like a tool now with which I'll be able to log into my target servers. Like you log in, we normally use SSH to log into our systems, right? Like I showed you the EC2 instance the other day. Whenever you would like to log into your EC2 instance, you normally use a protocol called as SSH, for which you need a username and password. The same thing can be used by Ansible also. The same thing can be used by Ansible also here. So that is where Ansible uses your SSH username and password to log into the target system. So instead of you log in, the controller will log into the system. It will start executing the changes that you asked to do it, whether it's an upgrade software, or it's an installation of software, whether it's an uninstallation of a software. where it can be creating a file or a deleting a file or a modifying a file. Whatever you do it, you can simply sit on the controller, push all the changes to the remote servers accordingly, right? That's why it is also known as push model. That is what we call it. Now, along with our team, Ansible is also known as your agent-less architecture, which means that you install Ansible only on the controller, the one machine you install Ansible software. But to implement a change on the remote servers, you do not need to install any software, right? That's why it is called as agent-less architecture. There is no software required for your Ansible to implement a change. So it is using the native system of your Linux system, which is SSH protocol. That is the default protocol. So you do not need to have anything else apart from the SSH of the system. That is the only thing that you can understand about it. Now, other requirement team is that team. Ansible is a tool which is developed on Python. So it requires a Python to be there on the controller as well as on the target systems. That is mandatory again. Now that is about just the Ansible architecture team, how it works and what is the way it's gonna work about it, right? So apart from this one team, whenever I would like to give some instruction to the Ansible, now I'll do it in two different ways. One is ad hoc command, one is a playbook. Now the playbook is nothing but a multiple task that you want to run it, and ad hoc commands are nothing but a single task. Like I would like to copy a file, that is called a single task, single instruction that I would like to run. So I can run either a single instruction for which I do not need to write a big script. The second thing is that whenever you think about writing a multiple instruction, there you might want to write a script. That script, we call it as a playbook in Ansible terminology. Okay, so an Ansible instruction can be written using a predefined syntaxes, predefined keywords called as modules, right? Modules are the predefined a piece of code which is utilized by the Ansible to write Ansible script. Anyway, you will be understanding that as we go on to the practical. That's all you need to understand, team. So, and how does your Ansible knows about the target servers on which it has to implement the system, right? Now that is where team Ansible need a file or inventory, we call it, right? Consider that your Ansible controller need a file, a plain text file with the target server IP addresses, right? IP1, IP2, and so on, right? Which means that again, right? So because whenever you log in also, you normally take the username, password, and the IP address of the system. Similarly, Ansible also using the same thing. Ansible requires an IP address and the username and password. As I told, Ansible uses SSH already for username and passwords, or it also needs the IP address. So Ansible reads a file called as inventory, and inside the inventory, it is your responsibility to put the IP address of the target systems accordingly. Now, this is simply team, we call it as Ansible architecture. How do we work on the Ansible architecture, right? So that is all you need to understand here. So let's say that right, so let's say that here let's get into the practical mode team, maybe instead of working on theoretical part here. So you understood the basics of what is configuration management, why do we need it, and then how Ansible architecture help you, or Ansible as a tool which will help you to understand or implement the changes. Now let's work on it practically, team. Or before I move on, if you have any questions so far, let me know, we can discuss it. Otherwise, meanwhile, I'll just show you the things which I'm doing it. So any questions? It took 1.5 hours to install Jenkins in a EC2 server. Is it a normal as we are using free tier? It did not took that much time for me, Pulak, right? It is not a normal, definitely. It's not normal. So think that there is some issue in your account would be there. So, so our IT team uses Ansible for updates. No, they use a different tool. They use SCCS, something that that Microsoft tool for updating Windows. Microsoft provides them a different tool. There are many tools, right? So your Ansible, they may use it, but they don't use that tool regularly. Inventory stores all the info of systems. That's right, up and it. That means that the IP address of the target system. That's all you do. Okay. Now, in order to work with a configuration management team, I need a controller. So let me take one system as my controller. So consider that I have three servers team which are in a running state right now. Consider that the first system I'll be putting it as controller, right? This is what I'm doing it. And the second system I'll be putting it as target node one or remote node one, to call it, whatever you say, right? Remote node one. I'm just naming a team just for your understanding only. Let's see that this is remote node 2, right? This is what all I'm putting it. Now these are the three servers teams, so let me log into all these three servers and then we will jump onto the things. So let me copy this, and I'm using the mobile system team, so to log in. Now my pem file here, ssh-i devops.pem file, ubuntu at this one. So I log in successfully. Now this is the first terminal team where I logged in, right? I switch to the root user. On the second terminal, I'll be logging into the second node, which is this one. So I'll take this one again, ssh-i devops.pem file. I logged into the second system, right? And I'll be logging into my third system also, which is, consider that this is the one. Now looking at the system team, you might be confusing with this host name basically. So what I'll do is that I'll simply update the host name so that we will have a clear picture on what server I'm working on. Now let me set the host name team. Let's say that this host name, I'm setting it as controller, which means that I'll be installing the Ansible software on a controller machine from which I'll be talking to the remote servers accordingly. I'll just set this one out. You might want to do a logout and log in back to reflect the changes, right? So logout, I'll do it. I'll be logging in back again. Now you should see that the host name will be reflecting with the controller name, right? As you can see that now, this is reflects as controller, right? That's all I'm doing. So I'm just setting up the host name team just for our understanding on which server we are working on. Let me set these ones also. Let's see that host name. I'll say that remote node one. I say that R node one remote server. Similarly, I just do logout. Login back again. Right, I logged in successfully and it shows that this one. That's great. This is remote node one. And finally, I'll do something here. This one also, sorry, host name, right? R node two. You can set any name team. It's not that I'm setting out for our understanding only. You can set any name if you want it. You can put your name also, that's fine. Now I'll do logout and login back. So just for our understanding only team, because we are working on multiple servers, we want to understand on which node I'm sitting in. So I just changed the host names to our understanding of the terminology that we are working on. Now consider that I changed the host name, right? Now, as I told that controller is the machine on which we have to install the Ansible software. So let me install the Ansible software here, team. So let me show you here. I'll be cloning this repository, correct? So I mean this one under that, see this one team, the repository which we shared with you. Go to the Ansible folder. Now under the Ansible folder team, you have this particular thing, which is script, right? So let me run these instructions. On the controller machine only team, I'll be just running only on the controller machine. If you're not able to understand anything, team, please feel free to stop me or please feel free to say it. So we will try to repeat the same thing again. Now I'm just installing Ansible on machine 1 team. That is what all we're trying to do it. Now, once I install Ansible on a particular server, now that machine, I call it as my Ansible controller. Okay. So once we have the Ansible controller is ready, then we will try to understand about how to work with Ansible. That is what we need to do it. Now, whenever you install Ansible team, right, let's say that there is a default installation, or let's say that before that, check the Ansible version if it is working fine. Now you can see that Ansible version is responding to me, which means that now I installed Ansible here. This machine becomes the Ansible controller for me. Now, once after that one is done, let's go to the default folder called as etc Ansible. This is the installation, not an installation folder, but the configuration folder of your Ansible. Whenever you install it, it will come up with a default config, which is called as ansible.cfg file, in which you will be seeing the default configurations of your Ansible tool. Along with that, there is also one file which is called as host. Now this file, we call it as inventory file team, the default inventory file. Now with which you will be able to put, right? So this is what it is, hosts, which I'm doing it. Now within this one team, you have the same thing here, correct? Now this is a commented lines team. I do not need it. It is just telling you the guidelines how to use this inventory file. Now I'll delete everything team here. I do not need any of these commented lines. I'll just empty the file, right? Delete everything, whatever is inside the file. And as I told it, inside the inventory file, you just need to put the target system IP address. So which system? Again, the target is nothing but this one. So what I'll do is that I'll get the IP address of this particular machine, hostname -I, this one, right? Or the same thing on the third machine also, right one. Now I'll take this one team. This is what it is. I'm preparing the inventory first of all. Now once I prepare the inventory, right? I have the inventory now, or Ansible knows on which servers it has to implement the changes. Or whenever I try to run my Ansible command, Ansible would read this file automatically. How Ansible is able to read this file is that the configurations are mentioned in the ansible.cfg file. For example, if I show it, look at this, the first line here, it shows that the default configurations which it will be picking up, which is called as your inventory. Now it is reading the file called as etc ansible and host file, right? Now this is the default inventory file that Ansible would read always. Whatever the IP address that are inside that particular file, Ansible thinks those are the remote servers on which it has to implement some changes. Okay, now Ansible knows the inventory, that's great. But does Ansible have the credentials to log into the target system, right? Does Ansible has the credentials to log in? No, right? So Ansible does not have a credential team. Means how would you log in? Now you need a username and password, or like you log into a Windows machine, right? Let's say that if you log into your laptop, you always put a username for your system and you have a password. Similar to that one team, you can also create a username and password here. You can do it, or we can also follow the some other guide which is called as username and SSH key. Like you logging in with this, right? A pem file is nothing but your SSH key only, that you are using it to pass it on the command line. Or you can share the SSH key directly to the target systems team, with which it will be able to log in without even providing any password. We can simply log in. So we will be configuring the username and SSH key team. We must create a common user across all the target system. That is mandatory. So including the controller, you will have to create a common username to implement the automation in a faster way. That is what is recommended approach, right? That is what we do it in real time also. For example, here I have mentioned the SSH key setup target, right? This is what I'm doing it. Consider that right? Consider that how do I set up the SSH key is that. Now, first of all, you need to have a common user team like Ansible here. You may add any user as you wish it. I'm just mentioning a common user called as Ansible, but is that I'll change this one. Good. All right, I'll take this one team to create a user on all the machines, which is controller and all the targets. That's all I'm doing it. Say that a user add is a Linux command using which I'm adding a user called as Ansible or any user that you want to create it. PEMFI is same for all the server instances. That's correct, Atul. I told you on the day one, you should be using the same key or you can use the same key if you want it. That's what I told you on the day one. If you missed it, please follow the video again, right? So here team, I am giving a common user called as Ansible, or I may replace that with any name that I like it. Let's say that I'll replace with my name, right? Why should I create Ansible? Confusion here. Let's say that I'm creating a user called as Naresh, right? I'm using configuration called as Naresh here. So okay, I use the same thing here, which is user add on the target systems also. This must be done on the systems team. That is what all I'm doing it, correct? Now after that, it says that you must add the user to the sudo privilege to make sure that your Ansible can implement any change without any permission issues, right? So I'll add this user to the sudo team, the same user which I created. Again, I need to change this, which is Naresh. Now I'll change the name here also, which is Naresh. You may run the straight away team. It's up to you whether you want to change that name to a different one or you want to use the same thing as it is in the instruction. That's your choice. But just that I'm using it here like this. Now, once you have this one created team, right? Now you need to generate the SSH keys. That's what we call it. Generate the SSH key for the above user, which is called as Naresh. You must switch to the user on the controller machine only, right? Consider that I'm going to switch to the Naresh user here on my controller machine only. See that su-naresh I call it. Now once I switch to the user called as Naresh team, I'll be running a command called as ssh keygen. SSH keygen I call it, which is going to generate the SSH key for my user called as Naresh. Do this. It will ask you to enter some details team. So just and do not enter anything, leave the defaults as they are, right? Just defaults it, right? Just see that one. Now once you're done with our team, it is going to generate some SSH key under your home folder, which is home Naresh and a .ssh folder that you see it, ls-al. You see a .ssh folder here. Now under the .ssh folder, right, it will actually generate some both the keys, which is called as a public key as well as the private key. Now you hold the private key on the controller machine itself because your controller has to log into the target servers, and you share the public key of this user to the target systems. That's what you need to do it, right? So ls-al, where you see this one, do a cat on the public key team .pub file here. Now you should be able to see some keys available here. Now what exactly you need to do is that you need to copy this key onto the remote servers for Ansible can log into the servers accordingly. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll follow the same guide here. This is what I'm doing it. Now on all the target machines team, target is nothing but the remote servers. You must switch to the user first of all. So let's switch to the user on the remote servers, su-naresh. I'll do the same thing here. So once I switch to the user, right, I will be running the commands here like mkdir, the .ssh folder. Now, why I'm doing this process team again, we could have gone for the username and password also, right? We will update this username. Now, but Cloud Machines team does not allow the username and password settings basically. Now that's the reason basically you are actually doing this, right? So here it is. I'm just creating a folder. Now you would also need to create a file called as authorized keys. I must change the username again. Okay, so you do this. I'll run the same thing here as well. Now, once you have done this one, change the permissions for that file. That's all you do it. So once you have done that one team, you will be editing that particular file, which is authorized keys, we call it, which means that we are setting the authorization for my controller to log in without any password, basically. Instead of a username and a password, it is going to use the username and SSH key for logging into the target systems. So this is what all I do team here. Consider that I'll enter this. So this will open the file. Now this will also open the file here. Now, once you have opened these two files team on all the target machines, you would have to copy the key from here, whatever the copy here key. Carefully copy it. While copy pasting also, it might give you some errors. So it is recommended that you would copy the file onto the notepad, right? Ensure that the entire string is on the single line. Let's say that here, I'll go for it. Word wrap, I'll remove it. Ensure that the single line team, the entire key is present on a single line. If you have a line breaks and everything, you might fail to log into the target system. So be careful about it. That's what you need to do it. Consider that I copied here and I'll paste in this file here. So this is what I'm doing. It means that I'm providing an authorization to my controller machine to log into these servers. This is the SSH key configuration team. This has to be done if you want to work with Ansible. That is mandatory, right? That is what they are doing it. That is what we are doing it basically. Now, once you have done with this one team, consider that I would like to log into my system for validating the authorization now, authentication and authorization. Consider that I use a command called as SSH, right? Now I would have provided the password on this command line, but we already shared it. What I'll do is that I'll use the username, which is Naresh at the IP address of this machine. I'll take this and I put it here, right? So if you say yes, Steve, it will work for you. You can see that I'm able to log into my remote node 1 without any issue. After I did not enter anything team, but just providing the username will provide you the authentication to the target servers accordingly. That's what is called as SSH key configuration. Now I'll test the same thing for my target node 2 also. This is what I'll do it. I'll say that I'll change the IP address here. Say yes again. Now you see that you're able to log into the remote node 2 also without any failure, which means that I have configured my SSH keys to the target servers without any issues. I'm now ready to implement any change with automation, right? From now onwards, team, this is one-time task. Again, I'm telling you, this is a one-time activity that you do it. Of course, we can copy the SSH keys in automated fashion also. That is a different approach, but just to make you understand, I showed you how to configure manually everything so that you would be able to understand them in the future again whenever you think about it. So can we see, can we use a different username for target servers? Of course you can use it, Pandit, but think about if I have 1,000 servers, how would you provide a different username for each server? Now that becomes a tedious job for you to provide username password every time you do a change on different servers. So if I have a common username and password, that will be easy for me to implement the changes. That's how we normally think about it. That's what you do, right? Your IT team also does the same thing, right? They normally configure a default administrator with a default password for your entire systems. Basically, that's what they do it as well. So with which they will be able to log in easily and they will be able to control anything easily, right? With multiple systems can be configured at once when you have a common username and common password. If you use different things, again, it will be a tedious task again for us. So from now onwards, team, try to understand that. Now from now onwards, try to understand that here, whenever you run any Ansible command, whenever you want to implement any change, right, you would have to run it as a Naresh user only so that you will be authenticated. For Naresh user only, we have shared the SSH keys, so only Naresh user has an authorization to log into the target systems. No other user has it, so you have to log in as that user only always. Now that team, I configured my inventory as well. Consider that etc host, right? etc Ansible host. I'll do it. Now this is where you just did it. That's good. That's what you did it. Now I have my inventory ready. Now I have my SSH keys configured. Now how do I run my Ansible commands? Now in order to run the Ansible command stream, there are two different ways that I was talking about it. One is called as ad hoc way, and the second thing is called as a playbook way, right? Now when we talk about ad hoc team, when we're talking about ad hoc, that is nothing but running a simple command like this, right? Ansible, I say it. Ansible is a command to run any command, just like you ran a git command yesterday. Now all, we call it all in the sense that all the servers in the inventory file, that's what you need to do it. Now think that I need to use a module team, means if I want to implement a change on the target server, Ansible comes up with a predefined uh, syntaxes. Those are called as modules, we call it. Now if I want to ping, or if I want to check a quick connectivity my target servers, I use -m. Now -m stands for module team. Module is what we do it. Let's say that I'll do a ping. When I say ping, basically it is going to ping the servers like you normally do a ping. It will get authenticated. It will not on. It was not. It is able to throw some errors for us. I'll just run this command. If it is getting, or if it is returning a success message, which means that my Ansible is able to communicate with the target systems that I do it, right? Now with this understanding team, we can start executing any instruction on the target server sitting on the controller itself. Can you quickly tell me how do I run, how do I check the disk space of my system? What is a command to check the disk space of the system team? A disk or a RAM, what you do it? What is a command that you run it normally? Do you guys aware of it? Du or a df-h, right? Normally you run a command team like this, right? I'll say that df-h. I see the disk utilization. Total I have 7.7, 1.5 GB and so on so on, right? Now this is a command team. Normally you get it in order to check something called as free-n, the RAM to check it. To know about the system, you run a command called as uname, right? Or uname -a, you call it, whatever the messages you get it, like this team. So you normally run these shell commands normally to validate something on a system, right? This is what the commands. Let's say that if I ask you to do the same thing on 100 servers, again, you cannot log into the 100 servers. You cannot run again, right? That is a problem. But I can ask my Ansible to run these commands and fetch the output immediately. Consider that here, I'll run a single command, right? I use a different module because I'm trying to think about running a shell command. Now Ansible provides a module called as shell for me. Shell is a module, right? And then for shell, I need an argument key, like what command you want to run it. Think that a shell module expects an argument. Argument is -a, we call it. Now within the codes, you run whatever command you want from it. Try to understand team, Ansible is a push model. So Ansible will push this command onto the remote servers. Looking at the inventory, okay, it thinks that it always has to implement this one on the servers that you mentioned inside the inventory file, right? Let's say that I'm going to run this. See that we can get the output immediately from 100 servers or 200 servers. It will take the same amount of time for you. It will easily write the output in a matter of seconds, right? Similarly, I want to, right? So free-m, I'll get the same output which I was getting there from all the servers at once, right? So you are sitting at one location now, team, you're able to implement, you're able to execute a command. So uname -a, I'll get the both systems output, right? The same output team which we're seeing on the terminals of your individual server are gathered and put it onto your controller machine immediately. So with Ansible now, I'll be able to do any task on my remote servers, right? It is not only about fetching some input team or output like this. You can also create a file or a directory if you want it, right? Let's say that I want to look at the content of my temp directory, ls-l, right, /temp folder. Whatever is under the temp folder, list me. Means I can validate quickly things, whatever the folders I want to do it. Good. You see the contents, whatever is available on the target system's temp directory. This is the content under the target system temp directory team. That's what you see it. Now consider that. You have it, right? Let's say I want to create a file. How do I create a file? You can use a shell module to create a file, but Ansible does provide a different module to create files or directories like that. Consider that if there is another module like file module, you have it. A file module will help you to create a file or a directory on the target systems easily, right? Let's say I ask you to create a directory called as DevOps on 100 servers. Think about that situation. Now this is the simplest command. I can run it easily, right? Let's say that I'll do this. Now it is asking you, like, it needs an argument. Okay, which location or which path you want to create it. Means when I say create a directory, should I create under the temp folder, root folder, use a home folder, where you want to create it? That is nothing but we call it as path. I'll say path here is equals to, let's say that temp, and you have to create a DevOps folder under the temp directory. That is what all I'm giving it. Apart from this one, whether, as I told, that file module is capable of creating a file or a directory or do something else also. Now I need to tell Ansible that, okay, is it a file or a directory? That's where Ansible has given state, we call it state, I call it, is equals to directory. Means that I'm telling that Ansible create a directory of what I'm mentioning here. Now this is what all you're doing, team. Let's say that I'll implement this. Now it says that there is something got changed, which means that the change has implemented successfully on the target servers. That's all you need to understand. If I want to quickly validate it, I'll just run a shell command again, right? See this? Now you will see that a DevOps directory got created here, right? See that this is logged in as a Nourish user and it got the permissions of Nourish user itself. On both the servers it created. Earlier we did had this directory stream, which is your DevOps folder, which was not present. Now I see it is present. Or if I want to validate individually, I'll go to the temp folder, do here the same content team, whatever you're seeing it here, the same content is being populated here as well, right? Now this is how, team, you can understand about implementing a change on the target server sitting at your system account. That is what you need to do it. So what happens if the path is not present in one of the target servers? It will fail. As simple as that, it will fail, right? Like, so what happens? It is not able to find out. It will fail the command on that particular server. It will throw the necessary output on your system. Let's say that here. Let's look at it, right? Why not? Let's say that I'm putting it as temp. Is it present on my system? It may not be, right? Let's look at it. What it says that there was an issue creating a temp requested, so it is not there, or permission denied or something, it is not available. That's what you will normally see the error accordingly, failed, right? The task is failed on your implementation of task is failed on the target server. That's what you need to understand about. Now these are the simple ad hoc commands, team. In Ansible terminology we call these are Ansible ad hoc commands. Okay, whatever the commands that I'm running on the command line to check the server connectivity, to execute a task, to create a file, to validate something. So all these things are called as ad hoc commands. Okay, single task that I want to perform it, we normally call them as ad hoc things. Now the second thing is that, team, that's good. Now you understood how do you prepare inventory, how do you write this one. Now let's understand a few more things about the inventory file, team. That is very much important again. Now I have the default inventory team under etc Ansible. This is where you saw that the default inventory is available. Now can I customize my inventory? Why should I use this default inventory always? File I'm talking about it. Can I not configure something under my home directory? Because they say that this is controlled by somebody else. I do not have a privilege right now. As an Nourish user, I may not be able to edit this file because this is owned by the root user, right? Somebody else prepared the inventory. Now I'm using that inventory. Why can't I prepare my own inventory under my own home directory, right? Consider that I'm going to prepare my own inventory here. I'll just copy the things team, cat etc ansible, right, host. Just what a IP address. I'm saying that I'm creating my own inventory team under my own home directory here, which is vi my inv, right? Now you will be putting the content of your inventory file. Okay, let me copy IP addresses. So remote node 1, I'll take the IP address. I'll paste it here. And I also take the other server IP address, copy it. Now, can I configure only IP addresses in the inventory? Can I put a DNS name? Can I put a host name? Is that possible for me? The answer is yes. We can put the DNS names also if I want it. DNS names I'm talking about. So let's say that I'm taking a DNS name, this one, IP, this particular full name, right? DNS copied. Consider that I can mention the DNS name also if I want it. I'll take another one. This one, right? So I'll copy it. So I can also configure my inventory DNS name stream. It is not necessary that you always put the IP address only. If your host names are resolved with the host names, you can do that also. Those host names also can be put in. Now you have a flexibility here, team, again, to understand, to make you understand more about it. We can also create a groups in the inventory, right? Let's say that I'll say this is my app servers, and let's say that this is my DB server. So you have a flexibility of creating the groups also in the inventory. That is even possible for you. Let's say that I create my own customized inventory now with certain groups. I have it. Now I do everything here, right? Now consider this one, team. I have 4 entries in my customized inventory, right? And that's what you do it. If I still do this one, team, Ansible all -m ping, which inventory would it book it? It is by default picks up only the default inventory in which I have 2 servers only, right? 2 entries only. So it will ping the 2 entries. But let's say that I want to I prepared my customized inventory. I want to use this inventory instead of the default one. Now for which, team, I can run the same command, right? But I need to provide -i, and you need to provide the path of your inventory, customized inventory. Is that home Naresh my inv? This is my customized inventory. This will override the default settings. It will execute your own custom inventory accordingly. Look at this. Now it is trying to put the SSH key exchange for that one because we haven't used this. So you see that it is failing it, right? Because it's saying that it is expecting that the host key exchange has to be happen here. Now that is the problem. So how do I get this problem resolved again? Now this is where, team, you must think about, right? Let's say that, team, whenever you do a first time, right, you ask yes or no option, correct? That is what you call as host key checking. It is basing that is saying that authenticity of the host key checking is failed because the DNS names are not configured properly here. So it is saying that host key verification is failed for the DNS name that you're configuring it. Now, how would I disable this? I can disable it also, and I do not need a host key checking always need to be done. Now, in order to customize the default Ansible configurations, team, like you prepared a custom inventory, you can also customize the Ansible configurations. The default configurations are available here, which is your ansible.cfg. Now, if you would like to customize the configurations, I would make a copy again, right? etc ansible, right? ansible.cfg to my current folder, which is under my home directory right now, right? Now this file, team, I can make changes. Let's say that ansible.cfg. Now within this one, team, you can customize your inventory path. Instead of providing on the command line, I can ask to pick up this one, right? Let's say that I'll put here home Ansible, sorry, home Naresh, right? Home Naresh my inv, right? Instead of the default file, now I want to pick up my own config file by default. That's what I'm setting out. Apart from this one, team, there will be some other setting that also we can do it. Here, if you see this, team, there is something which is called as host key checking. Now the host key checking, team, which I enabled right now, earlier it was true because it was commented. Now I'm enforcing that host key checking should be false, which means that Ansible should not check a host key checking. so that you will be resolving or you'll be able to communicate with the target host without doing anything or without checking the host key accordingly. Now let's save this file team after configuring your own styles, your own configurations. Now I'll go ahead and I will run the same command this time, right? I do not need to provide this on the command line now also team, because I already mentioned in my config file this one, right? I just run this. Now it should be able to successfully talk to all the target servers in my inventory by default. This is how team you can configure the inventory, right? You can configure the customized inventory. You can configure your customized you know, the config file however you want it. That's how you normally set it up in real time. Also, you customize the things on your own, because if you work on it, you can have your own configuration settings, like project wise configuration settings can be made, like multiple teams are working on the same controller machine to implement different changes on their own production servers. So every team can have their own inventory file, every team can have their own config file. Based on the way they want to connect to the target systems, they can customize everything in Ansible that will help them to do the necessary changes accordingly. Okay, so this is how team you must understand about how to work with Ansible ad hoc commands only, right? Inventory file and ad hoc commands. These are the major things that you would normally work on always. Okay, now I didn't tell you, like I also did some customization scheme in my inventory, which is called as grouping. Now how would I call a group? Basically, that's also you need to understand. Now within your Ansible command team, within your Ansible command, we are using a parameter called as all. Now all means that by default all the entries in your inventory file, right, whether it can be a DB group or app group, whatever the group that you are seeing, it all means that all the entries, it can be an IP address, it can be a DNS name, whatever it is you have it, all the entries I would like to have communication, right? I want to make some changes. Now instead of this one team all, right, I can change this one to a group name, right? I'll say web, right? Just simply that you call the group name that you have it in the inventory. The name must be present under the group, under the inventory file. Now it says that Ansible web-m bring. This is available in my inventory. It says that could not match a supplied host pattern, ignoring web. Do I have a web in my system, in my inventory? See that cat my inv. You don't see the web, right? Web is no group in my inventory, so that's why it is not able to get it. Instead of web, let's say that I'll call it as app, the group name that you define it. You can have any name in the square braces team, even your name also, the group name, because your name accordingly. Say that I'll call this one. Now this time it would call only the servers under the group called as app. Whatever the servers under the group, I can simply execute something on that particular servers only. Okay. Similarly, if I call DB, it will call the rest of the two servers or other servers with the DNS names that you have it. See that? So you can see that when I call app, it called the IP address only. Whenever I call the DB, it executed the DNS name value set. So which means that you have a flexibility of making your own configuration changes on your own servers the way you want to do it. You can control the complete changes that you would like to implement it on the target servers accordingly. So this is just an understanding team, again, the very basic stuff here you can understand about it, how to implement changes on all the target servers sitting at one location. That is what we are trying to achieve it here. So I'll stop here for a minute, team. If you have any questions, let me know, we can discuss it. Anybody have any questions? Are you guys able to follow me, or does anybody need any clarification on anything? Yes, team, are you all good? Can you say yes if you're all good? For private IP, is there any different process? No, there is no different process, Pandit. It is the same thing. There is no different process always. It is the same thing as your public IP. Only thing is that private IPs are static and the public IPs are dynamic. That is the only thing. All good. Can you show once again how group is created? The group is created under the inventory Hardik. So whenever you prepare your customized inventory, you open the inventory and you would have to use a square braces and mention a name inside the square brace. I can mention any name that becomes my group name. Okay. You have to open a square brace and then put a name inside it. Now that becomes the group name. However you want to mention your group name, you can mention it as per that. But in real time, we see that web servers, app servers, database servers, you have different types of servers. We normally group them based on the category that you do it. Okay, so here I'm saying that web. This is how you just create a group. Once you create a group in the inventory file, that group can be called on your command line, or the way you execute Ansible ad hoc command. You can simply call the group name under the Ansible command accordingly. Okay. So a group can have a both public and private IP, right? Yes, you can have anything as you wish it, Pandit, as long as the servers are reachable. You can mention a public IP or a private IP or a DNS or a host name. Anything is possible. Okay, as long as this target server is reachable, pingable, you should be able to do it. Right, so let's move on, team, if you're understanding. So you have used private IP. That's correct. I used a private IPs, guys. I use the private IPs and private DNS because I know that if I stop and start my EC2 instances, normally the public IP changes. Because try to understand that all the servers are in a same network, right? They're all inside the Ansible, the AWS data center only. I'm not making any internet connection. I'm not connecting to them, or you're neither the controller is using the internet to connect to the target servers, right? So as long as they are in an internal network, we can always use the private IP addresses. If you think that you're connecting to those servers from an external wall, like through the internet, then only prefer to use the IP, public IP addresses. Otherwise, it is not needed. The call was failed when we used DNS. Indirectly, we are sending requests to the same machine. What is the reason? See, basically, whenever you connect to a target server, Vinay, right, for the first time, whether you use the DNS name or IP address, based on the ID that you use it, for which it will generate some host key validation, right? There is a validation that your SSH does it by default based on the way that you are connecting it. Now, whenever I validated my SSH keys using an IP address, whenever you log in for the first time using an IP address, that IP address becomes the known host for your controller machine, or from where you log in actually, right? That is what happens. Now, when I log in with the first time with the IP address, then the key was exchanged with my controller. The key was already present on my controller machine, so it was able to successfully contact with that. And let's say that did I log into my target server anytime with the DNS name? No, right? That will be the first interaction that I'm doing it as a DNS name. So whenever you collect with a DNS name also, your controller machine could not identify that DNS name earlier. It is encountering that address first time. So it is trying to validate the host key with that name. So in that case, it is not able to proceed. That's the reason we disable the host key checking, just not to validate it, because it's not really mandatory to check the host keys. Because as long as you're in a private network, it is not necessary to check the host keys at all. That's why you can simply skip it. That's why I showed you the configuration of skipping rather than accepting the host keys or generating host keys every time. We just simply skipped it, or we asked Ansible to skip it accordingly. Once instances are created in AWS EC2, you mean to say we don't require internet. For EC2 instance to EC2 instance connections, you don't need internet. Okay, let's say that from your system to connect to the EC2 instance, you need an internet. Let's say that from EC2 instance 1 to EC2 instance 2, they don't need internet connection because they are in the same private network, right, Atul? Like if you and me are inside the same room, do you need internet to talk to each other? No, right? We don't need it. But if you are at your home and I'm at my home, like we are communicating now, we need an internet to communicate with each other, correct? That is the same concept here. Think that Ansible EC2 instance 1, like remote controller, remote node 1, remote node 2 are in the same home. So they can communicate within the same in the home, right? That's how you need to understand. I hope you got the understanding that, Atul. So how many instances we can create using free tier? You can create as many as you want it, Pandit, but you just need to be under the free tier limits. Can I connect via using PEM RDP using a .pem file? You mean to say you want to connect to a Windows machine? RDP is used for only Windows connections, right, Himanshu? Whenever we want to communicate with the Windows system, then we use RDP protocol. So if I want to connect to a remote Linux machine, it is always SSH protocol. But the PEM file can be used to connect to the remote Windows machine also. That is possible. You can configure the same PEM file to the target Windows machine, and you can use the same PEM file to log into the remote Windows machine also. But the Ansible or the AWS provides a way to generate a password using your PEM file later. That's what you can do it. Okay. Right, so I hope you all have some understanding now. How are we implementing changes? Correct? Now, with this understanding team, we will be jumping on to the next level of Ansible, right? I know that we have simply implemented a couple of changes or simple syntactical changes only, right? But these are all called as Ansible ad hoc commands and Ansible inventory. And how do I prepare my inventory? How do I customize my inventory? How do I check or run a few ad hoc commands? Ad hoc team, which means that is a single task. A single task is what I'm given to you, right? That's where you use ad hoc commands always. But for example, if I give you a task like this, like yesterday, we want to set up a Jenkins, right? Jenkins, Maven, everything on a server. So I ask you to install Java. I ask you install Jenkins, run the series of instructions. You know that we have run multiple instruction, right? Instead, for installing Java, we had 3 instructions. For installing Jenkins, we had 5 instructions. Now for installing Maven, I had 3 instructions again. Now I want to execute all those instructions step by step, one after the other, using Ansible. That is what the task I'm giving to you right now. How would you write the bigger automation now? Correct? So you want to install Java, you want to install Tomcat or Java Jenkins, and then you also want to install Maven with Ansible itself. Means rather than you installing it manually, I want to write a script. Right? A script will have a set of instruction. You know that a script is always called as a set of instruction, right? Now try to understand team. So that is what we always call it. So in Ansible way, how do I write a script now? So I have to have a way to write an Ansible script. Now that is where we normally talk about writing playbooks, right? Playbooks are normally written in a YAML syntaxing team, YAML or YML we call it. Now before playbooks are written in YAML syntax, right? We call it syntax, we call it. So now you need to know how do you write a YAML file. So how many of you know how do you write a YAML file? How many of you know how to write a YAML file? You guys know ever written a YAML file? Or do you know what is YAML first of all? What is XML? What is HTML? Tried once. Okay, great. Okay, so let me tell you team. So I'll be walking you through quickly what is YAML. Forget about Playbook, forget about Ansible for a minute. Just try to understand about what is YAML. How do I write a YAML file? Now the YAML rules are standard for wherever you want to use it. So that's the reason I'm telling it. YAML is a standard language. We call it as a data serialization language. YAML or YML, both are same thing, right? It is called as a data serialization, right? Serialization language, we call it. Now, what do you mean by data serialization language? Which means that representing data in a structured format, right? That is what you do it. So Structured format team. So you have to write the data in a structured format in a file, then that becomes a YAML file. But how do I write this structure? What are the rules? Now there is only one standard rule team, only one standard rule to be followed, right? When we write YAML file, when we write YAML or YML, that's correct. That's correct, Atul. That's absolutely correct. Now the rule is that indentation, right? So what do you mean by indentation team? It is nothing but the spaces. Spacing is mandatory here, means you must provide the necessary spaces to format the data into a structured format. Now, when I say spaces, do not use tabs. Tabs are strictly prohibited inside the YAML file. If you use a tab, that will be arising a syntax error. You will not be able to understand so easily if you do that mistake. Okay, so avoid using tabs inside the YAML file. I'm saying that strictly you must not use it. Okay, so that is what is the rule. Again, I'm telling it. Now, along with that, we also one another format that YAML follows, which always follows something called as key and a value pairs. Means I don't write a big tags like, greater than symbol, less than symbol, slashes. We don't use all those things. Here we just follow something called as a key and a value pair, which means that a key always ends with a colon team. Try to understand. I write a word that I call it as key. A key always ends with a colon. Now there is a space that will be given, and after that you provide a value to it. Now, no matter what, whatever the YAML file you see it, you always see the key value pairs only. These are the two things that you normally follow it, right? So one another thing here, team, right? Once after this one, the basic rules that you understood about it. After this one, let's understand that there are three types of data structures that we normally write it in a YAML file. Only three types of data structure, nothing else apart from that one, because I'm trying to write the data. I'm trying to write the data in a file. So data needs a data structure. So what structure should I follow it? Now, first of all, team, there are a structure called as, it's like a property file. It's just a property file only. You may think about property files. This is kind of a property file. You may think about it. But if I want to write the data, team, I follow three things, which is scalars, we call it, and second thing is called as your dictionary. Dict, we call it. Dictionary or a map, we call it, or we call it as a list or array. Now these are the only three types of data structure, team, that you will be seeing in any YAML file. No matter what, if you see 1,000 line of a YAML file also, you'll see only these three types of data structure inside a YAML file always. Now what I mean by scalars, right? Scalars are nothing but a straightforward key value pair which holds different data types. What are data types here? What kind of a data types you normally have it? What kind of a data types you have a team? You have a string value, you have integer values, you have a floating values, right? Float values, you have it 4.4, something like this. Now these are called as scalars, team. Now normally whenever you want to represent the data like this, right? Now you normally do this one, right? Let's say that in a programming, let's say that if in a Java, if I want to do it, name is equals to narration, I'll define it something. But here we always follow the standard of key value pair. Like say that name and there is a colon at the end, that becomes a key for me. There is a space and provide the value. Key, a value, key and value. But these are holding a different data types here. Now if I hold a values like this, then this becomes the data type called a scalar. Normally we call it as scalars. Basically that's what it is. Now this is the default syntax, team, that you follow it, but the basic one. Now I also prefer, team, to use a YAML editor to understand the syntaxes are going right. Like you use any other writing XMLs or HTMLs, also use the normal editors. YAML also can be done. There are YAML editors also available. For example, you have Notepad++, which is also YAML editor. So that I'll go to the language and I'll see to consider YAML. Now you can see that the colors getting changed for the keys, right? A value will be there, integer, float point, whatever you have it like this. Now this is the first type of a data type, team, data structure that you write it. Now the second type of a data structure is called as dictionary. Now, when I'm talking about a dictionary, team, a dictionary is a set of properties assigned for a particular object, or set of key or a single key will holding a multiple properties assigned to it accordingly, right? Consider that, for example, I have an object called as car. Now I ask you to define the properties of a car. What would you do it? You say the name of the car, maybe a BMW. Let's say the color of the car is red color. That you have the engine is 3-liter engine, and it is a sedan model. So you have multiple properties that you can assign to a particular object. Now that becomes a dictionary, right? Now how do I assign the data to a car key here? Multiple properties to a car key is that I'll come below, right? Right, so here we can do this, right? Now here team, whenever you want to provide a property, as I said, like indentation is very much important here, right? You come down from the level of the car indentation and you move inside the car, right? Let's say that a car indentation is starting on 0th level, so I must move at least one space inside, 2 spaces preferable. Then you start writing the properties of it. Let's say that name is BMW, color is red, right? Engine is a 3-liter engine, right? Likewise, you can start writing as many properties as you wanted, whatever you don't want to write. Now consider this team again, all the properties must start on the same indentation level, right? Well, I cannot write name here and then I can move the car color inside the name again, right? That is becomes a problem for me, which means that the color is no more a property of a car here, it becomes the property of name, because from the name you move the space inside, this becomes, or this belongs to the name, not belongs to the car anymore. That's how it works out. So every space that you give it in a YAML file is very much important. So you must be very careful whenever you write a YAML file about the spaces especially, right? I move it this one, now this becomes the property of car, right? So this is how team you must understand about writing a dictionary inside a YAML file always, okay? So this is what the team, you can have it. Just give me a second team. Okay, so I'm back. So here team, try to understand again, right? I'm discussing about this dictionary. This is how you would write a dictionary. You can have multiple dictionaries, or you may write anything inside your Ansible or in a YAML file, basically not about Ansible, but this is what you write it normally, right? Now, once you have done this one team, let's say that we'll move on to the last data structure, which is called as a list or array. I hope you guys might have an idea about what is an array. Array have the index values. Each index may hold a different types of data, right? Again, whatever the data you want to put it inside that array index, you can put it. Now, whenever I write index team, whenever I want to start a list inside my YAML file, I always start with hyphen, right? Let's say that I want to define an item here. Let's say that BMW, right? You may start at the indent level 0 also, that's fine, right? Now let's say that RD, right? And let's say that another list inside this one, let's say that Rolls-Royce, right? This is how team you write a list inside your thing. Whenever you think about it is a list, basically you must put a hyphen in front of it. Or in other words, I can also do this basically. Consider that there is a top level key I have, which is called as cars. Now the cars is a list for me. That's what I do. I'll move this one inside. Now let's say that a cars will hold this particular list of values like this. You may have a list directly in a YAML file starting from the indent level 0. Like the YAML file itself is a list completely, right? You can write it at the 0th indent level, or you might integrate, or you might inherit, or sorry, you might put inside a particular key as well. That's how you can define it. So this is how team you normally write. There are only 3 types of data structure. Again, I'm telling, one is scalars, one is dictionary or a map, and one is called as your list or array. Now, when you write a more complex YAML structures, what exactly you do is that you just nest the structures. Means the nested values are possible here, which means that consider that I want to inject a dictionary inside this list, right? Now let's start a BMW becomes a dictionary for me. I'll hold this one as a key right now. Now inside this one, where the BMW start, move 2 steps inside, or 1, and write the properties of BMW again. This is that color of the BMW is white, engine of the BMW is 2 liters or 3 liters. Like this team, this is the structure. Basically, you can see it. Now there is a list basically. Inside the list, now I have a dictionary inherited, right? Like this, you may write whatever the nested way you want. Means you can go multiple nested levels, nest inside, dictionary inside a dictionary inside a dictionary. You can go to any level down, that's okay. But you will be doing the nested structures only. But on the top level, you would see a dictionary or a list or a straightforward key value pair, which is scalars we call it. Now this is about just a general thing about the YAML file team. A general thing about the YAML file. I'm not talking about Playbook here. It's just a general thing about any YAML file you take it. Today we might write an Ansible Playbook as a YAML file. Tomorrow we might write a Docker compose files as YAML files again. And Kubernetes also has some manifest files which are also YAML files. So every technology now, every hot technology in the market uses a YAML file. Now that is the reason we see that every DevOps engineer now must have a skill of writing YAML files becomes mandatory. So you must be understanding this one team. Please start learning about YAML file, right? That is very much important for you. Okay. So I hope you're all clear on the now what is YAML and how does it work, right? How to write a YAML file basically. Now with this understanding team, with this understanding of this one, let's jump onto the Ansible Playbook concept. So here team, when I'm talking about Ansible Playbook, right? So a Playbook team, first of all, understand the terminology inside the Playbook. We have something called as a task. Now, what is a task here? Basically, a task is nothing but instruction. So let's say our task is a change. Task is a change, right? That you want to run it. Change that we want to execute, implement, rather implement on the target system, right? For example, copy. Copy is a task, I call it, right? I want to copy a file to the target system. That is becomes my task, right? Copy or creating file or install something or uninstall something. All these things becomes your normal tasks, right? Everything is a task basically. You may write multiple tasks or a list of tasks inside a call. You will have a list of tasks. Consider that task is a thing team. Task is a change that we can implement. We want to implement on the target systems always. Now consider that there is a term called as play, right? Now the play is team, we call it as a set of tasks, right, that we want to run on set of hosts, nothing but a target systems, right? You call it, right? Let's say that I have 100 target servers on which I want to create a file, copy a file, or implement another change. So there are a set of tasks, right? Try to understand that a set of tasks is nothing but a set or a list of tasks, I call it. Another one, you can see that a list of tasks that we want to run on the target servers. That is what we call it. Now you must understand these two terminology, then we will understand about a playbook, because we write playbooks in Ansible. What is a playbook? Is that a playbook is a list of plays, right? Just like inheriting team, one object in another one. Try to understand now. Try to read it from the playbook. It is a list of plays. Now when I say list of plays, it can have multiple plays in it. But what is a play again? A play is nothing but a list of tasks that we want to run on set of host. List of tasks, for example, I want to install Java, install Jenkins, install Maven. These are a list of tasks I want to do it, right? And that's how you need to understand about it. Now, what is a task again? It is just nothing but a simple change that I want to implement. Install Java is a task. Install Tomcat is a task. Install Jenkins is a task. Install, Maven is a task for you. So these are all something called as task according. So that is what we must understand, team. So in order to write a playbook, I must understand what is play and I must understand what is task. So tasks are normally written using Ansible modules, right? So just to give you information here, we use Ansible modules to write a task, right? That is what we wrote. So we must be aware of Ansible modules team to write any task in Ansible format accordingly. So this is what we call it. Now for this, with this understanding team, let's try to understand about, right, a playbook. Now, if I want to start a playbook team, Ansible playbook, it will be consisting of list of plays. When I say list of plays here, what is a list? A list starts with hyphen, right? So you must write like this one. So Ansible playbook team always starts with a hyphen. That is what you must understand. Now I'll name the play. And I say that this is my play one. It is also a straightforward key value pair. It can be a string or anything that you do. Now, as I said, like a play one, nothing but a play is always about running a set of tasks or a list of tasks on a set of hosts or a list of hosts, we call it, right? Here team, because we want to run on the set of hosts, we will be defining the host that we want to run it. Hosts, I call it. Now let's say that I want to run these tasks on the web group or a web servers on my inventory file. That is what you understand. Now the group name must be available in the inventory file. Link it there accordingly. That's all you need to understand. Now after that, we want to write a list of tasks, right? When I want a list of tasks, basically I'll define a keyword called as tasks. Task is nothing but a list of tasks. So I'll move inside, right? Now I'll start writing a list. Whenever I say list again, it must start with a hyphen. Let's say that a name, I call it task one. Task one, I call it as, right, copy a file. This is what I do it. This is just a name team. This is a canonical name. That's it. This value is your choice. Just for your understanding, only you're writing this text, whatever you are doing it. It is no predefined text like that. Uh, I'm saying that this task is about copying a file. So for copy team, I need a source and destination, which file to be copied where. So we say that a module of Ansible, which is called as copy, right? A copy is a module team. We call it Ansible module. Now this module team requires multiple properties to be passed to it, right? Okay, which file I want to copy it? What is the source file? I need it. What is the destination where I would like to copy it? What is the permissions on the file you want to update it? Like that, you have multiple properties can be assigned to a particular object called as copy. So when I see this one, multiple properties, this becomes a dictionary for me. So I'll come down, I'll move two spaces. Let's say that I'll call it as source. Source is like, let's say temp devops.txt file. I want to copy it. And the destination, I do what? Destination is on the target server. I would like to copy on my temp folder, right? So this is what I said. Now I want to update the permissions for this, right? Mode, I call it. Let's say that 0777, right? I just want to update this one like this, right? Now this is how team you would write multiple properties to it accordingly, multiple properties to it. Now this is a list of items team or list of tasks. The first item in the list is this one. Similarly, I can copy it, right? I'll paste it. So this is a task 2 for me. Whenever I see a list, second task, it will become a second item. Now let's say that create a directory, I call it. This task is about create a directory, right? And I write a different module here. For implementing each task team, you might have a different set of modules. You must be aware of these modules to write Ansible playbooks always. Source, this is not, the file does not take a path, file module does not take an argument or attribute called as source. It will normally take an argument called as path, right? Where I want to create a file or a directory. Consider that here I would like to create a folder, right? Like we did it. Like that I want to create a folder called as Vinay, right? And where I want to create it, which I already given under the temp folder. But is it a file or a directory? Let's say that we call it as state. We say that this is going to be a directory, right? This is what I'm giving it in. This is how you would normally give it a playbook. Now this is called as a single play team. Now consider that I want to write another play. Writing a second play is completely your choice. It's up to you whether you want to write it or not. It is not mandatory, but I can write a second play like this inside the same playbook. Play 2. This play would be against DB servers. Consider that this is going to create a copy file devops1.txt and vinay1.directory. Means different set of tasks running against a different set of servers within a single playbook. Again, a playbook is a list of plays. A play is a set of host running a set of tasks running against a set of host. Again, we call it. What is mode here? A mode is not chmod. Do you know the chmod command in Linux? Yes, Pandit. Do you know the chmod command in Linux? That is the same thing here called as mode. That is what I'm writing it as mode simply, right? The Ansible way of writing that one. That is the only thing here. So this is how team, right? This is how you write a playbook. Consider that team. This is my playbook right now. I'll just copy this entire code for me. If you want to validate the syntaxes are right, let's convert this into a YAML. So now, do you understand the errors here? See this one, this editor team showing you, this editor is showing you the red color, which means that, which is a wrong syntax basically for me. This will throw an error if I put it into, or if I execute this one. Why does it throwing in red color? Because I used a tab. See this? If I use a tab, it becomes a red color, right? Now it gives some green color again. See this? Now this is why I say team no tabs inside your YAML file. Now this playbook is a big problem here, right? Because we used completely the tabs, that will go to throw error always. You must understand this. That's why I made a mistake purposefully, and I'm showing you importance of not using tabs inside a playbook. Okay, you must understand that. That's what I do it. Okay, I will update this one again. This. So this is our play 2 db. This is my task 1. Say that DevOps 1.txt. Let's say that Vinay 1 folder here. Okay, so this is what all the things team. Let's say that now we are looking good with the YAML file syntax and everything. Consider that you just do this and go to the controller machine, right? In your controller right now, under that you just need to write a playbook. Let's say that vi my playbook. You can name anything team, just do it an extension of YML or YAML, both are fine. Open the file and put it. You just have to put this one like this. This is how you would look like a YAML file always. Now you must be understanding where I write a list, where I write a dictionary, right? Where we write a straightforward key value pair, right? This is just an understanding that you need to have it before you write any YAML file according. Keep the rules team, that's all you need to understand. Now let's see that here I have written my playbook. Now I would need to execute this playbook, right? Where I will be running Ansible playbook is the command. In order to execute ad hoc command, I just run the Ansible command. If I want to execute a playbook, Ansible gives a command called as Ansible-playbook. That's a single command, a single line without any spaces. And then you would need to give your playbook name. Now, do I need to mention the inventory, host, and everything? Because everything is inside the playbook. Now you know that already Ssh Keys are exchanged. I do not need to do anything here. Just execute this. But here team, before I execute it, try to understand that I have written a source. Now where this source is, where the file is exist, does this file exist on my system somewhere? Where this file supposed to be? Is it on the controller machine or is it on the remote machines only? Okay. By default, the source is the controller only. Okay. By default, Ansible treats the source is always the controller machine only. Okay. Which means that on my machine right now, I must have this file. Is it available? No such file, which means that the source is not there. Ansible playbook will failure for sure. If you want me to run, you can run it and see that that will be fail accordingly because there is no file that will be present. So what I'll do is that touch devops.txt and devops1.txt. So I'll be creating both the files so that it will be creating or copying from the source to the destination accordingly. If you want to validate it, let's go here. Right now, you do not see anything called as DevOps or DevOps1 or Vinay 1 here. But once after we done executing the playbook, you must see all of them are created there. Ansible playbook, my playbook.yml. You can see that it is doing the necessary task. The name team that you keep it will represent here, right? The task one copy files. You would understand that this task is about copying some file. This task is about creating a directory. Now here again, play two, you're doing it, which is also creating a task file and doing this one accordingly, right? Now this is how team you must understand about executing a playbook, right? Play here, one play, and the second play that you are doing it. So you have to understand this one team. Now once I do it here, if I do ls-l, do you see that DevOps and DevOps1.txt which are created? You have set the full permission here, which is 777. Now you also created a folder called as Vinay as well as Vinay1 because the targets are same thing team, but the group name is different. That's it. So here it is. You are able to set the full permission for this one. Now think that team, the same change if I implement it on my 100 target servers, how easy it will be for you to enter, make some changes, right? Now I hope you are getting the concept of implementing any change on the target system sitting at one location, right? That is what the main motto behind the configuration management tool or implementing configuration management, right? Making a changes on your system account. But if I want to copy a file now, let's say I would like to copy my war file onto all my production. Can I copy it quickly? How much time does it take for me? Right, hardly 5 minutes. I can finish my deployment. That's how team you must understand about implementing changes in real time also with a playbooks accordingly. So this is just an understanding team how to work with Ansible on the top level, right? Anybody have any questions here? Okay, great. So with this understanding team, let me show you one realistic playbook. How can we configure the source of remote? Okay, that's a good question. So vi my playbook. Now you just need to say that a remote src, right? Here there is another thing called as there is something called as a remote underscore src say yes, which means that I'm saying that the target, the source is a remote server, not the controller here. This is the only thing that you need to set it up. Then you'll be able to consider that the file should be available on the remote itself, and you should be able to copy to the remote itself accordingly, right? That's what you need to understand here. Let's say that a temp nourish, right? Now consider that this is what I'm doing. So let's say that from temp dot directory to the temp slash Vinay folder, I call it. But Vinay is already present. So let's say that I'm running it. So in this case, it will consider that you have to copy this file from the temp folder to temp Vinay folder on the remote itself, right? Let's say that I'm going to delete this on my local temp devops.txt, right? Sorry, I do rm. This is what I did it. So let the devops.1.txt be there, right? Now let me run the same playbook. Will it work? Yes, it worked for me. Can see that. Now does it do this one? Go to the remote, right? So you have ll Vinay here. See that devops.txt copy to the Vinay folder, right? Yes, Vinay, you understood that, I believe. How do I make the remote source? Source is remote server only. You will just need to add a parameter called as remote src, say yes. Then it will consider always that the source is also a remote server. Does that make sense, or do you have any question on that? Yes or no, Vinay? Are you clear with the parameter which I'm using it? I believe you're good. So yes, if first task or the in-between task in Playbook fails, then it will continue or just exit from Playbook. It will just exit from Playbook. It will just exit from Playbook. Definitely, it will not proceed further. At least on that server, means it will proceed further on the failed server. It will not proceed further. If it is another server is successful on that server, it will continue to do it accordingly. It will not stop running the Playbook on a successful server. Let's say that task one failed on server one, then it will stop doing everything after that on the server one. But let's say that a task one is successful on the server two, it will not stop the playbook. It will continue to execute the rest of the task on the server two without any questions accordingly. What we just did here, can you elaborate remote SRC? Pandit, earlier the source, I said that the source is always the controller machine, correct? Which means that the file must be present on my controller machine. Then only you will be able to copy to the remote, correct? Now, right now, I deleted a file here. The source, which is this is not the source for me right now. I'm saying that a source is the remote server, means that the target server is a one, which means that I'm copying a file from temp devops.txt. This file is being copied into the Vinay folder. Source and destination both are my remote server only. That is what is called as remote SRC is yes. Does that make sense now? Right, that's good. So this is about the basic thing that how do you understand a playbook and how do you execute a playbook basically using Ansible, right? Now this is just a basic example team, but let me show you one realistic example of playbook for setting up various things with a single playbook accordingly. Now all these things are available team within your labs again. This is the labs tab provided to you also. You have all the things available here. Installation, ad hoc commands, right? And you have your, the playbook commands as well, playbooks as well. You have playbook one, playbook two. But I'm going to take an example of Tomcat team here, setting up a Tomcat on the target servers, right? So I'll take this one, the playbook, right? We can write it, but I'm just trying to explain this one. So let's go through this. Let's see that vi Tomcat dot YML, whatever I'm doing it. Now within this one team, I'll be using various modules. Maybe I'll be introducing you to all the modules here. So just look at them. How do they work together, right? So this is what it is I'm doing it. Now consider that here team, this is our host I'm doing it. You don't need to name it always, but if you would like to name it, you can name it. Means I can write a single play or multiple plays also. That is even possible for me, right? In this playbook, I'm writing only the single play, right? Let's say that host is the one which I'm starting directly, or you may write it with a name. Name is not a mandatory parameter team. If you want it, you add it. Let's say that install Tomcat is my play name, right? Or setup Tomcat. This is what the play name I'm doing it. Inside the play, I have a set of tasks again running against a set of host. Now you could also mention a specific IP address team if you want to execute against a one server. Just mention the server IP address, that is even possible. Or you may set up against all the target servers using a group name like this. You may do anything. Now become yes parameter team. Try to understand that. Why am I giving the become yes? Now, can I run an apt command with an array user here? Let's say that apt get install something, git. I'm just trying to run a command. What happens if I run with this? Will it allow me to do it? What it is telling you? Can I run an apt get command? Means for installation, can I use an array user? Is it possible for me? No, right? With a normal user, we cannot have enough privileges to run a particular system commands, especially to stop services, to start services, to uninstall something, you have it, right? Now for something team, we get permission denied. So instead of doing this one, once after I log in as an array, I'll do a sudo. Now I'll be switching to the root user, right? Now why it is asking me this? Let's say that I'll be doing this one, right? This is what all you're doing it. Now let's see this one team. I must be able to switch to the root user, then only do it, right? su-nourish, right? If I do sudo su hyphen, right? From Ansible or from nourish user team, I should be able to switch to the root user without the password, or we must enter the password again. But nourish user team, we did not enter any password, right? We did not create any password, but it is not able to switch to it, then it will fail that account, right? That is a problem. So in order to fix this issues team, right? let's say that I'll check the sudoers file, etc sudoers. I'll do what? Sorry, sudoers.d file. I'll do it. I'm just setting the permissions here, team. I think we had set up the permission already, but it is not letting me do it. Now it is not having any file here. Did it not created a file here? Let's see that. Let me see the command mistake, team. I might have done in the command mistake. Oh, okay. So I did not run the permission command, team, here. I think I missed the command called as sudo echo command, the command which I was running here. Just save me this file, team. Since I did not provide the enough privileges for my this one. As part of the configurations team, I think I missed something, which is this command. Can you see this? I ran a command here, but I forgot to run the same command on the target servers. This is what I'm providing the nourish user as sudo privileges, so that nourish user will be able to switch to the root user. I think I forgot to run this on both the target nodes. Let me run it. Now, once I run this particular command, team, from, let's say that your Ansible is logging in as an array user like this. Now, whenever Ansible logs in as an array user, and it will implement everything as an array user, as we can see that DevOps or Vinay or every folder is created with an array user, right? Which means every command that you're running with Ansible, it is executing it as an array user only. But for example, again, if I want to run an apt get command or apt command inside my system, right? Apt install get, this will throw me a permission denied error, which means that an array user does not have a privilege to run apt commands. That is what the meaning. But instead, if I switch to a root user, now, because once after I log into the array user should be able to switch to a root user, right? Now that is what you're doing. You're executing a sudo command here to switch to a root user. Then I'll run command called as apt install get. Now in this case, I'll be able to run the necessary stuff like this, right? Now this is what the understanding team, which means that what I'm trying to tell you is that with controller also, the first thing is that we are trying to log in as an array user, right? Whenever I'm running any playbook or any Ansible command, I'm executing it as array user. So it is logging in as an array user to the target system, right? And then it is trying to execute everything as an array user on the remote server. But if your user does not have a privilege, then Ansible cannot do anything also. So for which we are provided the user sudo privileges. First of all, you need to take care of the permission here, so that a sudo user or nourish user should be able to switch to the root user. Once you do that one, now we must give the same information to the Ansible also, right? Now that is where team, I'm saying that a statement called as become. Now, when I say become yes here, which means that I'm asking my Ansible to log in with a normal user called as Tomcat Naresh. Once after it logs in as Naresh user, before you run this task, you become root user, right? Become yes means that by default, it becomes a root user, and then it will start running these tasks accordingly, because I'm running the apt module here, team. Try to understand the same apt you ran it here, and the apt module is what I'm running, for which I need sudo privilege. That is the reason, team, we are trying to do it. So this is what you're understanding. In the first task here, team, I'm just trying to run something called as apt get install or apt install open jdk 8 jdk. This is what I'm doing it, which is how you write it here. The name of the task is install java 1.8 apt. I'm installing open jdk 8 and state present, which means that if the software is not present on my system, ensure that that is present, which means it is going to install it on the target server accordingly. Second task is that I'm creating a group called as Tomcat. You know that user add or group add commands in Linux, that is the same thing. Now here I'm also adding the user called as Tomcat, and I'm adding the user to the group called as Tomcat. Now after this one, team, I'm using a download Tomcat URL here. There is a get URL module with which I'll be able to run this. Let me change the syntax here, right? So I'm using this properties. So this is what I'm doing it. This is the URL, team, and it must be failing it because it needs a destination. Let's see that add a destination here, which is your temp folder. This is what I'm doing it. Right after that team, I'm trying to extract the tar file. Right now the command module I'm using it here, which is using which we are actually modifying, or downloading this one. Right, I'll change this one to /temp folder. Right, because we are downloading under the temp folder here. That is what all I'm doing it. URL is what I'm doing it. You must check this URL is working, team. If it is not working, again your playbook will fail it. So let's say that I'm extracting it to the tar to the opt folder, which means I'm installing thing to the opt folder accordingly. Now once after I do this one, creating some symlinks or moving something here, consider that okay, you are just renaming a directory here, moving the commands or move command, and I'm using it to moving this one to this particular folder. That's okay. Now after that, I'm also changing the permissions of my things accordingly, right? So permission changing of the folder called as opt tomcat. That's all I'm doing it. After that, I'm just starting my tomcat server, right? I'm just using this one. Now, because I'm trying to change the tomcat user team, I want to start my service as my tomcat user only. So I'm just running this particular command as a tomcat user. Means that I'm running this particular command as a tomcat user. That's what we're trying to use it. Now, this is how team you may write some kind of, using various modules of Ansible, right? Various modules of Ansible, you must start writing your automations accordingly. You may feel it at the time, team, what module should I use it, but you must understand the task that you want to do it, and you can run the necessary modules as per your need. Now this is what it is, team. So let's say that the only thing here that I need to validate whether this URL is present or not. I'll copy this. I'll go to this one, maybe team, because the playbook was prepared a long ago. So let's see that if it is available. Okay, so it is able to download team, which means the URL is present. That's fantastic. So I'm able to download team just for testing. I did it. It is downloading it, which means that the URL is working fine for me. Absolutely. So let's keep it as it is here, and we can try to proceed further accordingly. Let's save this one, right? And I'll start installing team. I'll run the playbook. For example, I'll validate here Java-version, which is not present as of now. Now let me run the playbook here. Ansible Playbook tomcat.yml. This will go smoothly, team. Whatever it is doing it will try to install everything. It will try to set up my tomcat server, various tasks. I'm doing it with a single shot accordingly. So if you have any questions, team, again, so far, if you didn't understand anything about that playbook, please let me know. These tasks will execute one after the another, right? That's correct, right, Pandit? This will be a sequential execution. As you can see, it is trying to run the install Java on both the servers parallelly, but the task is serial on a single server accordingly. Okay. On every server parallel, but the task on a single server is a serial execution. You have to. After installing Java, then it will move on to the next. Like that, it will move on a single server. How can we configure a custom inventory file in a playbook, as we used -i option in ad hoc? So far, playbook we can run Ansible playbook _name -i. You can do that, Vinay. Absolutely right. If I have a custom inventory, again, I always provide the -i parameter, whether it is with whether it is with an ad hoc command or a playbook, it doesn't matter. You can always use a -i parameter. You can customize your inventory accordingly. Okay. Now you can see that, team, I have done almost every task successfully, which means that my Tomcat installation, everything is successful. Let's validate here. Now I see the Java is installed. If I go to OPT folder, I see my Tomcat is present. Now if I see ps-ef grep Tomcat, the Tomcat process is running. So you can see that, team, in a matter of 2 minutes, by the time I'm talking to you guys, I'm able to create, install Java, create a user, create a group, download the Tomcat, configure the Tomcat in a customized location, change the permissions of the folder, and start my Tomcat service. How much time did I took it to implement the entire task here, right? So it takes a very less time team once you know how to write some automations with Ansible, which is a very easy. Again, I'm telling you, writing Ansible automations are very easy. Once you start writing the things, you will definitely understand it. The only thing is you need is just a practice and a basic knowledge on the Linux. How do I implement certain changes? So that is the only understanding that you need to have a team. Otherwise, we are all good, right, to implement any change on any server accordingly. Okay, everybody clear so far until this one, or do you have any questions? Anybody have any questions, team? Clear, everybody? Okay, I'm feeling that everybody is good, team. So in Sublime Text also, can we write a YAML syntax? I'm not sure, Atul, because I never used a Sublime Text. I need to test it. So I never used a Sublime Text, sorry. So I know I'm not really sure. Maybe you can try it and check it, whether it is allowing the YAML syntaxing or not. Okay, so great. Is there any good source to learn the YAML file? Okay, so see the YAML file, there is no good source, because if you go anywhere in the internet, you will just find with the explanation which I did it. If you understand what the explanation which I did it, you should be able to do it anything with the YAML file. The only thing is that you need to practice. But that is the only thing. There is no other good source other than what I told, because there is nothing much to know about YAML file except what I told, right? Indentation, scalars, dictionary, list. If you understand these three things, you can write any YAML file. Only thing is that you just need practice. But if you try to go and search in the internet also, people talk about these things only. That's all you needed. So just try to start writing the YAML files rather than reading it, and rather than don't waste time on reading the YAML syntaxing and everything. That never helps you. Start writing it. That will really help you. Okay. So, I mean, this is what all about it, right? About the Ansible team, but we can extend it. Ansible also has too many things to discuss, but on the top level, the only idea that we're trying to give you here is that using Ansible as a configuration management tool, we can sit on single location and implement any change on any target server, right? Any number of target server, any target server, doesn't matter, right? So this is how, team, you just have to work with Ansible. You must start practicing more and more things, team. So please go ahead and start practicing the things accordingly. If you need any help, you can ask me. We will try to troubleshoot it. If you have anything, again, please write an email whenever you see a issue with your practice and everything. Please write an email to training@devopsuniversity.org. We will look into it and we will try to help you as much as we can. We are going to do it. So where we're going to find the methods of YAML. What do you mean by methods, Pandit? What do you mean by methods? Okay, those things you have this one, right? Ansible documentation, you have it. Let's say that if I want to know the module, copy module Ansible, right? I use a copy module. I want to write module about it. Let's say that go to the docs.ansible.com. Now Ansible provides over 3,000 modules. That here it is, a copy file modules to remote locations. Now here it is, right? You see attributes, backup, checksum, content, decrypt, destination is what I used it, right? Follows, force. There are many attributes here. Mode is what we used it. Like I showed you only a couple of things, like a remote SRC, right? You have it. So for every module, you have set of attributes to use it. Like Ansible has many modules that you can use it. Any module you can find it under this one. Let's say that a file module. Alright, you see this one. Let's say that built-in file contents, this one. You can see that read file contents. You have it. You have various modules here. Or let's say that if you want to find it on the server itself, on the controller machine, you can do a command here which is called as Ansible doc. I want to know the Ansible documentation. I want to know about a module called as file. Write file. Now it will display that a set of attributes of files, and all the attributes are available here. You can find it on the local machine, on the controller machine, or you can search in the Google, which is docs.ansible.com, which will list all the properties for you. Easy to find it. Can we use a playbook that is already created? Means can I use another playbook as a reference rather than the copy paste? Like I have already created a Tomcat playbook, so there is any way to use directly rather than copy paste. I'm not understanding your question here, Vinay. Means that I have given you a playbook, whether you can copy that and write it, copy it and write execute it, which will work fine for you. What do you mean by other way around? I mean, I didn't understand. Rather than copy paste, like how do you write a YAML file or how do you generate a YAML file? You mean to say maybe? Is that what you mean to say? See, I have given you a playbook which is already created. You can just run it if you want it. If you want to write your own automation, you have to write your own things according to your requirement. It is everything is about a requirement only. You have to know your requirement and then start using writing the playbooks. I mean, am I understood your question correctly, Vinay? So please let me know if you're looking for something different. Can I? Okay. Okay, you're self-muted. Please speak. Please unmute yourself, Vinay, and speak. Can you speak? Or you're going to take some time? You have to unmute yourself to speak. Please unmute and speak. Is it Atul or Vinay? Oh, you're sorry. I'm sorry. I'm speaking about Atul. Atul. Wait a second. Who is want to speak here? Atul or Vinay? Atul, can you speak? Atul,
Hello.
I see you on. Yeah.
Sir, my question is, sir, you created instances in EC2 where we require an internet connectivity. Okay, and then after that we install Ansible on the controller side for implementing all the commands on Ansible. Did we require an internet connectivity? My question was that.
No. See, to install Ansible, you did online mode. Once you install Ansible for implementing any task, again, if it is a standard Linux commands, you don't need an internet connection. But for downloading something like Java, everything, right? Again, for example, here the commands that are a specific thing require a specific internet connection. For example, here under the Tomcat, right? For installing Java, if I use apt command, this requires internet connection. For example, to create this does not need internet connection. Okay. And to use your get URL, this also needs an internet connection, right? But rest of the task does not need an internet connection again, right? So it depends on the task whether you need an internet connection or not, that will be decided. But in an organization level, we never use the internet, which means that you can directly download prior to the installation, right? And you can start copying them and start using that also according to your requirement. Okay. So implementing a standard changes, you don't need an internet connection, only a specific task that would require an internet connection sometimes. Okay. I hope you are clear. Got it. Great. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Now with this understanding team, I would like to stop with Ansible team because we have to start with the next tool, which is also very important one, which is a containerization. So we will have to start with the Docker today. So in order to complete all the modules again within the timeline that given to us. So I'll start with Ansible team. Whatever we understood today, hope you are all understood about the basic concepts of configuration management, how to and then how to implement the things. So with our understandings, let's stop with Ansible and let's jump onto the containerization, which is called as Docker, right? So I know that I have given a definition on day one of container. What is a container basically, or why do I need a container, right? So the basic definition team, we already understood about it, but let's try to understand a little bit more about the containers now. So are we good to move to the containers? Is everybody? Shall we move on to the containers? Okay, great. I believe yes. Let's go on to the containers. Now, okay, team, that's fine now. Let's consider that like we are understanding about the thing so far, which is very good. Now we understood like how do I set up this stack on my target servers with a single Ansible playbook. I could run it. I can deploy my application to all 1,000 servers. I can install Tomcat on all my 1,000 servers easily by writing a simple Ansible automation and run it against all the servers in parallel. That would help me to deploy the same thing, configure the same thing on all 1,000 machines for me, right? So so far team, again, I was just told you that we have to install the Tomcat on 1,000 servers. So I implemented an automation. I was able to configure my Tomcat on 1,000 servers. Now I would deploy my application on 1,000 servers. Can you guarantee that the configuration of Tomcat is intact, or it is the same thing on 1,000 servers? Can I guarantee that? Is there not a possibility that some server get crashed and the configuration on one server got modified without our knowledge? Then in that case, what happens basically? Correct? Am I making sense here? Try to understand the question here, team. Let's say that with all the hard work of automation, we have installed Tomcat on 1,000 servers, and we are saying that all 1,000 servers have Tomcat. But once you set up it, today it was good, tomorrow it was good, but after 1 week, can you guarantee that all the configurations of the Tomcat server are intact? Which means that everything is consistently the same thing on all the 1,000 servers. Can I guarantee that 100% all the time? Is it possible for me? Or do I have to check every day, is my servers are intact or not? So, which means that technically, if you speak it, I cannot guarantee it because somebody may log into one server and modify some configuration without prior notice or without intimating somebody. Somebody modified it. So I cannot guarantee that though I implemented, though I automated the configuration management, right? If I install or if I manage a Tomcat server separately on each and every server, I cannot guarantee the consistency of my environment across 1,000 servers. Now that is where team we started, or we had a problem of blame game, right? Whenever you deploy some application to production, it stops working, right? And in the development, it's still working fine, right? Now that's where the developer and the operation teams are blaming each other. The problem is yours and yours. They will fight each other. Now, I told you already, right? In order to do this one, in order to mitigate that blame game problem, we thought of containerization, right? Means that team, so far I told you how to deploy the Tomcat and everything, but we are thinking now, right? In the package, we generated a var file, that's great, but I want to containerize it rather than, in this case team, without a container. What exactly we're doing is that we normally creating a var file. Now the Tomcat and everything is pre-set up, right? Pre-set up on every environment. Then we are thinking to ship only the application code, which is a var file, onto every environment, whereas the dependencies of my var file, what is the dependency of my var file? To run it, I need a Tomcat, I need a Java, maybe Java libraries are there, Tomcat configurations are there. Everything is maintained separately on each and every server that you want to deploy the application. Now, this way of delivery team, delivering only the application code, is causing me the environment inconsistency or a server inconsistency, which are leading to a application failure, which is bringing me a downtime inside my production environment. Now, how do I mitigate that problem, or how do I ensure that so the application would work same across all the servers all the time without any issues. That is what the understanding we need to have it. So for which team we just want to have a container, right? Rather than delivering only the application code, I would like to containerize my application. When I say containerizing my application, I'll just say that I'll prepare a container or a package, further package your war file, right? Further packaging your war file plus all its dependencies, Tomcat, Java, OS libraries, whatever is needed. Along with that, you have any other dependencies like server.xml configurations or anything, all the things you would like to package it and deliver this package into all the environments, right? Now, this is what we are thinking about it. If I deploy it here, if it is working fine, I'll deliver it here. If it's delivering here, if it is working fine here, finally, I'll put it in my production. Now, the only thing is that in this way, rather than delivering everything, rather than delivering only the application code, I'm thinking or I'm changing the way of deploying an application, right? The way we used to do earlier is that we just deploy the application code, but we want to now, with containerization in the picture, we want to deploy the application plus its runtime environment together as a package. Now this package we are calling it as a container, right? This package we are calling it as a container, and this container need to be built first of all, or we need a tool to build this package. Like you used Maven to build the var file or to convert the source code into one single file, right? A var file. Now I want to have a single file again, like my var file, but it should have the var file plus Tomcat plus Java plus OS, whatever is needed to run my var file. Everything need to have it in a single package. Now that package we are calling it as container, or in other words, we also call it as a Docker image, or we need a tool to build this package. That tool we call it as Docker, right? In other simple words, we call it as Docker is a containerization tool, right? Docker is a containerization tool which is helping us to run or build our containers, right? Now we also heard about the slogan called as build, ship, and run. This is what we understood, team. This is how you can understand about it. Now this is where team we always use it, or this is what we call as Docker, which means that team now on every environment, right? I do not have to have this entire stack. Instead, I just need to have something which is a Docker and a OS install. Means a machine with the required OS always. Once this is run, you have to have on every environment. This is the only requirement. Rest of the softwares are completely eliminated, right? Rest of the softwares are you do not need to install us separately on every environment, so that you will have a lot of maintenance eliminated, right? I don't need to worry about my server, my application is going to work or not, like that, right? That is completely eliminated. Now once you have done that one, in order to run this package again, I need Docker. So I have Docker running anyway. I'll just simply ship this package and I run it, so my application will be available for me as it is, right? If it is working fine in dev, it will be working in fine in production also. And whenever I want to run multiple instances also, team, I will just replicate this. This is just like, as I told, it is like a blueprint. I have it. This package is like a blueprint. Now I can replicate this as many times I want to make, and I can make a Xerox of it as many times as I want it, right? Now the every Xerox will have its own content. It will be working as its own independent system, right? Like I say that if I spin up this into 100 instances, which is equals to running 100 Tomcat servers on 100 machines accordingly, right? I don't need to install Tomcat separately on 100 machines. Rather, I'll just copy this file, I'll run it. So every server will have its own copy, its own things. We have it according. That is what is called as container, team. That's how it becomes a flexible one. Now, in other words, team, we call this package is called as a Docker image, right? We call this as Docker image. Now, whenever you run this one, right, we run the Docker image. Now that becomes my Docker container. Now, what exactly is the difference between the Docker image, right, and a Docker container team? If you try to understand, both have the same content only, both have exactly the same content, but the difference is that one is in a running state, one is in a stable state or a static state, we call it, right? Think about, team, the difference between a parked car and a running car on the road. What exactly is the difference that you see it? What is the difference between a parked car in your in your lobby and there is a running car on the road? What exactly is the difference? Right? It is the same car, right? Wheel moves basically, and engine is in a starting state, which means that that is powering up and you're utilizing the purpose of the car when you have started the engine, right? Now think that, team, the image is like a parked car. That's that Tomcat is available, application is available, which is doing nothing there, right? You're just doing it, or it is available for me. Now whenever I think that I need to access my application, I need to get it up, which means that I need to start my engine, which means that in this case, I need to start my Tomcat server. So whenever I use this image and I get it up, our start engine, that becomes a container. So the runtime instance of an image is called as a container, and a container would always runs as a process on your system, right? It's just a process team, just like Jenkins was a process. Now the container is also a process on your system, which internally runs your Tomcat, Java application, everything together. So you will be able to access an application when it is in a running state. When it is just an image, when it is just sitting on your system, you could not access application accordingly. Okay. So that is the understanding, team, that you just need to have it. The difference between a Docker image and a Docker container in simple words. So I hope everybody is clear here, team. So now with this understanding, basically, let's move ahead and install the Docker, and we'll start working on the Docker containers directly. Shall we move? Or any questions on this one, containers? Yes, team, any questions on the Docker? You must have a lot of doubts, but I'm not seeing any. Anybody have any doubts? Again, I'm asking you. No? Okay, great. So that's really great. Okay, so let's start seeing, team, how does the Docker containers work, right? We must understand, first of all, team, we must install the Docker again. So let's say that I would install the Docker on this machine, my machine one. You can install anywhere. You may create a new instance and install also, but that's okay. Consider that I'm using the same machine here, controller, to install my Docker, and I will start running the containers here, right? Docker-v, I'll do it to check the Docker is installed or not. So let's say that Docker-v says that Docker is not found, which means we must install the Docker software. Try to understand, team, a machine with an operating system must be there to install the Docker always. So let's install the Docker. All right, I'll go to the Docker folder here inside your repository which you have given. Go to the Docker folder, and inside the Docker folder you have install folder. Now inside this you have install docker manual.txt. So please follow this one. So here are the series of commands again that you can do it. You can also write a simple Ansible playbook to run all these commands together. That also can be done, but let's say that this is what you do it. I'm just running these commands, team, to install the Docker on my system. Just that we are just removing if there is any previous installations. So we are downloading the Docker software, team, from the official Docker website, downloads.docker.com. Now Docker has two editions again, which is Enterprise Edition as well as a Community Edition. Now the Docker is also an open source product by default, which is we call it as Community Edition, which is called as a Docker CE. That's what we normally install always. Now there is a Docker Enterprise Edition is also available, which is a supported version, which means that the Docker organization will support if there are any problems with your Docker software while you're operating in the production-like environment. So enterprise edition is paid, so you must go with that paid things for that one to get the service accordingly. The community edition is an open source completely. We can just download it and install it and start using it accordingly. So once I installed Docker software team, I should be able to run my Docker containers. Consider that team, I installed it. I say docker-v. Now I see my Docker version, which is 19.03.13. This is the latest version of the Docker team that you can understand about it. Now, once after this one team, you must understand that a Docker is also a service that runs on your system. So you should be able to start the Docker service, Docker status. I do it. You should be seeing that your Docker service is running it, active and running it. Means if I active and if I status is running, then only I can perform the Docker related commands. Okay. So this is how team you can simply install the Docker, right? You have the Docker installed, means you have a machine, right? You have a machine basically. And so that you have a machine with an operating system, which is a host OS, we call it normally. OS is available here. Now on top of it, you just installed a Docker software. Now on top of this one team, we must be running a container. Now in order to run a container, what do I need? In order to run a container, what do I need, team? Yes. What is that I need to run a container? Container ID. Sorry, no Sujata. Docker is a software that runs your container. Of course, you have the Docker. What else is needed? Without creating a container, you cannot get the container ID, right? If I have a container ID, I can do that, but consider that what is needed to run the containers. I just told you, or we just discussed also. What is that you needed here to run a container? I told image, right? There is an image that is needed to be there, then only you can run a container. So first thing is that you must prepare your Docker images, then you must be able to run a container from it accordingly, right? Now, can I create an image directly? Do I know how do I create an image? I really do not know, right? So we cannot directly jump on creating Docker images team because we don't know how to create them yet. So, but there is something that there is a public repository which is called as hub.docker.com. This is like a GitHub team, but it is called as a Docker Hub, right? We call this as a Docker Hub, a place where you can get some Docker images or public Docker images available, right? Publicly available Docker images available for me. I will be able to download these Docker images, which are open source, which are free again. We can just download it and we'll try to understand how do I run the Docker containers from the existing Docker images. Once you understand how do I run a container from existing Docker image, then we will go and learn about how do I run my own how do I build my own Docker images also, which we will be understanding accordingly. Okay, so consider that here we will be understanding, right? How do I get this? Let's say that I can look for any technology. Let's say that I want a Tomcat. So far we've been talking about Tomcat. So let's say that I want to look for a Tomcat Docker image, right? So whenever I'm talking about an image team of a software, you're containerizing your software. That's what you must understand about it. When I want to containerize my software, which is my application called as sample app R file, then I will put sample app R file, which is needed to run that one. But if I say that I want to containerize the Tomcat software, what are all the things that are needed to run my Tomcat software? Tomcat, software need to be installed, you need a Java and you need a OS libraries. That's all you needed, right? So try to understand, team, the Tomcat image would consist of something called as a Tomcat software, a Java installed, and a OS library needed to run your Tomcat. That is what the understanding that you need to have it. Whenever you download an image, the images will always have that one. Nginx is a web server. You have it. If you look for some databases such as MongoDB, if you are aware of, so there is a Mongo database image available. You don't know how to install, you don't know how to work with it, but you can just run them accordingly. That's how easy it is. But thing is that, team, you do have a plain operating system images also. Let's say that I would like to customize, or my manager asked me to customize a Docker image for me. He asked me to use Ubuntu 18.04 version or Ubuntu 16.04 version. Then he asked me to install Java 1.11. Then he asked me to install Tomcat 9.3. Then he asked me to put my var file and do it. In that case, team, I have to choose each software separately and start building up, right? You should stack it up accordingly and you should build your entire stuff accordingly. So that is where, team, so you have various types of images. For example, if you would like to get Ubuntu, right, you would have Ubuntu Docker image also here. Let's say that you have a CentOS Docker image as well. You have various things, team, like this always available for you. You should be able to download these things, right? That's all you need to understand. Let's say that I would like to download a Tomcat image again for our understanding only. If I want to see this is an official Tomcat image, like official Apache organization providing this Tomcat software, so I can go for it. Click on this. It will show you that how to get this image onto your local, which is docker pull tomcat. This is a command which is asking you to run it on the system. So whenever I pull the Tomcat, team, which will always pull the latest version of the Tomcat, but instead if I want to download a specific version of the Tomcat, then I will go on to the tags. Now tags are nothing but the versions of the Tomcat image, team. Here tags are the versions of the Tomcat image. Now let's say that there is a specific tags available with a specific versioning. If I want a Tomcat with JDK 15, I can download this. Open JDK or Oracle JDK, you have multiple things available. Tomcat 9039 version with JDK 8, right? This is what you see. There are different versions of the Tomcat with along with the JDK versions. If you would like to download these things, you would use this command again specifically. There's a command here given to each version of the Tomcat. You can download it according to your requirement. Okay, now let me download the latest version only. Docker pull Tomcat, I'll do it. Now, in order to download any images from the Docker Hub, team, for this again you need internet connection, because by default your Docker will be connecting to Docker Hub. Whenever I say Docker pull Tomcat, which needs an internet connection. Without an internet connection, you cannot pull the images here. So let's say that a pull image. Now this will download the necessary things onto your system, team. Once this downloads the image onto your system, now you can look at the things which are available on your local system also. Okay, consider that Docker images or Docker image ls is the command to know the images on the local server, like the installation you did it. This is where you see it. Docker pull Tomcat will pull the Tomcat image from the Docker Hub to your local server. Once it is pulled, we can have Docker image ls to validate the local Docker images, right? Now you can pull any kind of images, team. Docker pull Ubuntu. Ubuntu will pull, team. If I do not mention a tag, which will always pull a tag called as latest. Latest is the version that you see it always, right? Let's say that Docker image ls. You have it. Like the latest is the tag, team, that is pulled. This is like a latest version of the software that you're downloading software. But if you'd like to pull a specific version, which is called as tag, for example, Ubuntu 16.04 is I want it. If I say latest, I don't know what version it is, but let's say if I want 16.04, I would give like this Ubuntu colon dot 16.04 accordingly. right? This is how you can understand. You can pull the various Docker images from the Docker Hub, right? Completely. Docker pull nginx. You can pull any number of images team. Try to understand that every image is having a certain size that will occupy some system space on your system, right? You must be aware of how much images that you can store it on your system again, right? So this is how team you can pull various Docker images onto your system always, and you can check the local images with a command called as docker image ls. And you can also know more details about a Docker image using a Docker image inspect, I call it. Means to know more details about the image on your local, do this one, Docker image inspect, and you give your image name, right? This is what you do it. You may use the tag always, that is recommended. This is how it will display about a lot of details. Means inside this image, I have Java home under this one, which is using Java 11. This is a Java a Tomcat installation location like this. Tomcat version, I have it. Likewise, team, there are many details that you can know about your Tomcat image when you do a inspect of that one, right? Just to know about the images team, that all I'm doing it. Now consider that Docker image ls again. You know now Docker pull command, Docker image ls command, Docker image inspect command to know more details about it. Once finally, Docker image rm to remove an image from the local system. So I'll be removing the Ubuntu latest one. Remove this. Likewise, you can delete an image from the local like this. This is what team you can understand about the image operations. Get an image using a pull command, list the images on the local with the Docker image ls, know more details about the image using Docker image inspect command, delete an image from the local using a Docker image rm command. This is all the commands team that you would like to know about the image operations. The existing images, we have not built our own images, but existing images, we are just looking at it accordingly. This is what you can understand. So we can running, OS on our local machine OS. So what is the difference between a virtual box and the Docker? Okay, so VirtualBox is a hypervisor, Vinay, right, which will let you create virtual machines, right? Now consider that a Docker is a container. There is a difference between a virtual machine and a Docker container, right? Now you need to understand the differences between a virtual machine and the Docker container, right? So let's try to understand them. If you have another 10 minutes, I can explain the differences between the virtual machine and the Docker containers. So we will be understanding the difference accordingly. Can we extend another 10 minutes if you're all okay? Yes, everybody? Okay, great. So let's go ahead and understand about the differences. Now I just show you T just to make you understand that we can do this. We will be working on the Docker tomorrow also, don't worry. So first of all, let's try to understand the differences now between the virtual machines and the Docker containers. So coming back this one team, let me delete this first of all. Now, how do I create my Docker? So virtual machine CSR team, which we already discussed about it, right? We normally take a big hardware, right? Like with a huge capacity like 64 CPU, let's say that 100 GB of RAM, right? Now let's say that 10 terabytes of disk, which is what I told you on day one, right? Which is what we do normally. Now, once you have this one, this is a physical, we call it. You can directly convert your physical by installing an operating system. But instead, we normally install a hypervisor, which is nothing but your virtual box or whatever it is, right? Which is in the enterprise level, we may not use this, but we directly install a hypervisor on the hardware. Now this will let me create a virtual machines, independent, isolated from each other. Every virtual machine have its own IP address. Every machine can have their own stack of softwares and they can run on individually accordingly, right? Now these are the things team which we have it, virtual machines, VM1, right? VM2, and let's say that a VM3. right? Likewise, you can create as many VMs as you wanted on a single hardware. The only consideration team to create a virtual machine is that you must allocate the hardware resources to each virtual machine, right? Like 4 CPU, 10 GB RAM, right? And let's say that 2 TB of disk. This is what the hardware capacity I must, I'm stressing here, I must allocate it to create a virtual machine. Once I allocate a hardware resource or partition my hardware resources and allocate to a particular virtual machine, then it will allow me to create or install an operating system, which is called as normally a full OS. We call it as, let's have a full OS. I install it here. Full functionalities of an operating system, you install it. On top of it, you normally have your stack: application, Tomcat, Java. Like I have just installed here on my this one. I have a virtual machine. I have a full operating system, which is Ubuntu. On top of it, I have Java, right? Java hyphen version, right? What happened here? Okay, Java hyphen version. Now you have Java installed directly on the virtual machine. Also the Tomcat, ps-ef grep Tomcat. You see the Tomcat is running on my virtual machine directly. So you have an operating system, Java, then Tomcat, and then you can install your application also. This is virtual machine stack basically that you have it. Now consider this one team. This is called as your hardware virtualization, right? Hardware virtualization, we call it, right? This is called as hardware virtualization. Now consider that team, the same thing I would like to implement here with a Dockerized application, right? I want to run my application. To run my application, I used a virtual machine here, but instead of this one, in order to run my application, I'm going to use the Docker now. Consider that the same hardware I have it, right? Same hardware capacity. I took this. Now here team, instead of installing a hypervisor, now I directly install a OS, right? Like say that I installed Ubuntu OS, like we have it on my controller machine, like you have Ubuntu OS right now. Okay. Now on top of it, I just installed my Docker, right? Now with this one team, I'll be running a container, right? Not running the virtual machine here. Consider that the containers can be run on top of a virtual machine also, on top of a physical server also. Consider that in this case, this is my physical server, right? On top of a physical server, instead of virtualizing it, I'm running a container here. That now the container definition team, you already understood about it. A container would have an application, nothing but application, plus the dependencies of it, such as Tomcat, Java, and OS library, right? Now, if you look at the differences team here, in order to create a container, I do not need to allocate any resource to it, okay? The first and foremost point that you would understand is that while I create a container, I do not need to allocate a resource to it. Without that one, containers can be created directly, and containers can take resources directly from the underlying hardware, which means that if my container wants 10 MB, it will take 10 MB only. If it requires to grow up to 1 GB, it can grow up to 1 GB also, which means that containers have a dynamic nature here, dynamic nature of dynamic resources, we call it. So you have more better utilization of resources with this kind of a thing, and your application may have a stability in running in the production accordingly. That's the first point. Okay, now this is happening because Docker provides something called as OS virtualization, right? OS level virtualization, we call it. Now Docker acquires the necessary resources and it will allocate it to the container to run it. That is the first difference that you'll find it between a virtual machine and a container. That is the first difference. So in order to create a container, I do not need to allocate any resource from the underlying hardware. Containers have a dynamic nature of grabbing resources, whatever is needed, using the Docker. A Docker lets to utilize it accordingly. That is the first difference. Now the second difference team here is that, what is the second difference that you observe? If you look at the content of a virtual machine and if you look at the content of a container, right, I have the same content almost, but what exactly is the difference is that the operating system team that I'm using here is a very lightweight operating system. The difference between a virtual machine and container is that basically we call it. So in a virtual machine team, I have a full operating system, which means that there are many functionalities of my operating system are by default coming out. So I install it. I have, let's say that VI editor, I have cat, I have ps, I have various commands, right? But if I ask you a question, team, in order to run my Java application, do you need a VI editor? What do you guys think? Do you need a VI editor to run your application? In order to run a VLC player on your system, do you need Notepad? No, right? You do not need it. Similarly, do I need a PS command? Do I need a cat command? Do I need a netstat command? Do I need a ping command? These are all the default functionalities of your default full operating system. In a virtual machine, we use this full operating system. So that would take a larger space on your system. Means if I install an operating system in my virtual machine, that is going to consume at least 2 to 3 GB first of all. Now, whenever you start your virtual machine, it takes at least 2 to 3 minutes because your operating system need to initialize a lot of things first of all. Then it will make you available. Then you run your application. That is what it is, right? Now that is the major difference, team. You must understand here. So that is the reason virtual machines takes a longer time to boot up because there is a lot of content on the operating system which is getting initialized first of all. Once a full operating system is initialized, then your Tomcat initializes, then your application initializes. That will take at least 5 minutes to do the things. So but let's say that team in the container, we are using a very minimal operating system by eliminating all such features which are not required to run my application. So in my container operating system team, which we call it as OS library, but not OS here, right? It's called as OS library. Libraries team, there is nothing to initialize on a library. Like Java is a library, right? A Python is a library. Do you run the Python something like that? No, right? Python does not start anything. So whenever you write a program, it executes it. That's it. Similarly, team OS also, we minimized it or we made it a simple one, which is called as OS library, which in other words, whatever is required to run my application, I keep that much OS only inside my container. So my container size drastically decreases. That is the reason, team. If you look at the image size, consider that my Tomcat image, right? In this, I'm saying I have a OS library, I have a Java software, and I have a Tomcat software. All together becomes 647 MB only, right? That's how, team, you must understand that the containers have a OS libraries, but not a full operating system. Now that is good enough for me to run my application, and the rest of the things, whatever is required to you, it will grab it or it will inherit from the underlying host OS. Nothing but from this OS, it will inherit it if needed something accordingly. Now to inherit it, Docker will help it to the container systems account. So that's why, team, containers are very lightweight. When they are lightweight, they boot up in couple of seconds quickly, right? If I want to start my Tomcat team now, it will take only 2 seconds for me rather than initializing various things in operating system. So there is nothing to initialize at the Java OS, nothing to initialize at Tomcat. So you will directly initialize the Tomcat in the container. This will hardly take 2 seconds or 2 to 3 seconds to start my Tomcat. Now I'll have my application ready within 2 to 3 seconds, right? Now that is the major difference between the virtual machine and the container. So the containers are become lightweight because of their lightweight OS nature. Right? Containers can boot up faster because there is nothing to initialize at the lower layers, right? So containers boot up faster. Containers having a dynamic nature of grabbing resources from the underlying hardware directly, right? So this is how, team, you can differentiate the containers from the virtual machines. That will provide a lot of benefits for me to move them faster, to run them easiest way. All these functionalities are coming to the picture accordingly. Make sense? Now you understood the difference between a virtual machine and a container. Now these OS libraries team are very minimal. For example, if I go to Ubuntu OS library, if it is a virtual machine, you might see the 3 GB, but here it is 70 MB. 72 MB something, that's what you see, right? So the library stream means we reduce the footprint of my operating system and we keep it only what is necessary for my application inside the containers. That's how the containers have become very popular and very much lightweight, and thus providing us the benefits of lightweight nature, moving fast nature, and dynamic resources nature. So everything has brought up by the Docker to make our life easier and run your application more smoother and more dynamically in the on-demand needs section accordingly. And here team, like you create multiple virtual machines, we can run multiple containers of different applications also, because every container is independent of other container team. Every container can have a different type of application. Like every virtual machine can have different like application here. Let's say the .NET here. Now the containers also can run, let's say that a Python application here, or let's say that a PHP application here. Like you can run any number of containers on a single system. Every container is independent, just like your virtual machine. Every container have its own IP address, just like your container virtual machines. Likewise, team, containers possess almost the same as virtual machine, but it is not a virtual machine. It's just a single process that runs on your system accordingly. So that's how you need to understand, team. I hope you got some idea now about the difference between a virtual machines and a containers. That's how we work with containers directly. So we have not pulled the full Ubuntu OS in that Ubuntu image. We have just the full Ubuntu OS library. What does that image contain? Which libraries that are Ubuntu OS contain? So the basic libraries of which is needed to run your application, right? Let's say that basic network kernel features, right, which is needed to talk to kernel and get the necessary features. Vinay, that's what you need to do. There's a basic bash terminal, you have it. Like if you want to understand about it, read about the image, right? What all the libraries it will included. Those who designed this particular Ubuntu will be putting all the libraries. Means if I want to dig down, I want to see it, I must understand what these guys have put in inside it, right? You must go to this maintained by this canonical, right? You need to go to this developer section and try to read it, what all the things which we have it. Now this is the core. Basically you can see what is inside this. You will be having that content only, otherwise it will nothing else apart from that one. Okay, you must look at this locations and you will understand all the libraries that kept it. So alias and arcs and everything, what do you have it accordingly. So you have to do this and everything will be available. Okay, so this is how you could understand about what is there. Read about this documentation and you'll understand about what is there inside. But otherwise, it is not our duty to build the basic OS images like you generally do it. These guys who are officially responsible to provide this official Ubuntu images and everything, they will provide the minimal libraries also, which essentially needed for every application. Apart from that one, if you need to customize the things again, they will let you customize also. You could run whatever you want it again. Okay, make sense? Any questions now? Now that is way team, if you look at the container size, my Ubuntu, right, which is only 127 MB, right? If I pull the latest Ubuntu, I think that is even lesser size, right? Docker pull Ubuntu, I'll say it. The latest version of the Ubuntu is even lesser size. I say it is downloading. Docker image ls. If you do it, now you see that the latest version is only 70 MB, which means they further refined it, further removed from the 1604 version to the latest version. They further reduce the size of the Docker image. So you will have the benefit of lightweight nature. Means they are splitting everything. They kept the core functionality that is needed. Rest everything is customizable. If I want a functionality at the OS level, I can add it again if I want it. They removed it. It's your choice to add it or not add it based on your application need again. Okay, now this is how team you must understand about how to work with Docker containers, or just understanding about what is Docker and how does it work with the Docker, right? Now I have certain images team here. We can create a container from it. Right now to check the containers running, there will be no containers, right? There are no containers. We have it on our system team. We just have the images only. From the image, we will run the containers. That's what we do it. So we will run the containers, but maybe I think it's time to end up the session here, I believe. And we'll see you tomorrow again with more content on the Docker. We'll try to understand how to run containers. We'll try to understand how to build a Docker image, and we'll try to understand how to run multiple containers in the production scale using a Docker Swarm container orchestrations. We'll be discussing about all these concepts tomorrow. If you have any questions, we will discuss again tomorrow. But right now, for today's topics, if you have anything, let me know. Otherwise, I'll stop here. Now, I hope you all enjoy the session today as well. We'll see you tomorrow again. Have a great evening. Good night. Take care.